Hello, guys. The stream on. Okay, bit of echo there. Hello, guys, and welcome to the final match of the group stage of the King's Cup 2 tournament. So it's coming down to the final three players fighting for the final two spots to make it here into the finals. Today we will have Baron von Glower versus Innocent Bubbles, with Birdo definitely watching with anticipation, hoping that he will be able to solidify his spot into the finals. And we'll talk about all of that and more, and here to help commentate these games and sort of set up the drama here, break down the decks, is none other than Gardner.
Hey guys, I'm back. I told you I was just going to hide in his closet until the stream happened. No, I'm legitimately really excited for this. This is going to be close. As usual, I will drop my links in Twitch chat. Please do give me a follow. Check out my content for players of all sorts. There's plenty more to come. I have a whole to-do list right now of videos that are going to get done at some point, I promise. If life would just leave me alone for 10 minutes. But yeah, this is a blast. I don't want to go too much into me because I'm just excited to get into this, because this is going to be tense, because we have three players who are very much in this. And even the player who's theoretically out in the lead and kind of only needs one game win has something to play for, and that's all about how cool this format is and how competitive it's become. So yeah, I'm legitimately hyped, and hopefully all of you are too.
Yeah, so here is the leaderboard. As you can see, Baron von Glower is sitting there at the top with 4 points. Killswitch is unfortunately eliminated. We saw him falling to Birdo Burrito in 6 games yesterday at -1 point. But where you need to be looking here is in the middle, where Innocent Bubbles and Birdo Burrito each have 1 point. However, the way the scoring system works is it is the game win-loss difference, so you can lose points, and you will lose points on a loss, which means if Innocent Bubbles loses this game, he will lose at least 1 point, dropping him below Birdo Burrito, meaning we will have a Baron Birdo finals. However, if Innocent Bubbles wins, then it will be a Baron Bubbles final, unless Innocent Bubbles wins by a sweep, a 4-0, which will drop Baron down below Birdo, meaning that we will have a Innocent Bubbles versus Birdo Burrito final. And all three of these options, completely possible. Obviously, it is much more likely we will see Baron in the finals versus either Bubbles or Birdo, but it is all to play for here. And, I mean, we've seen these players battle back and forth, and I mean, Birdo lost the first 2 matches, but because of the way it's set up, it doesn't necessarily come down to these big game 7s, where it's sort of winner takes all. You will get enough points, and you can see Birdo is even on games 10-10, same as Bubbles, 7-7. Obviously, Birdo has played 3 matches. Bubbles is about to play his 3rd match. But at the top there, you have Baron von Glower, who really wins when it counts, because he is sitting up there with 8 wins, 6 losses, 2 match wins, and if he can win this 3rd match, he will head into the finals with a 1-game advantage in the best of 9 that they will play, and that reward goes to any player who can win all 3 of their matches. If he still advances in first seed, but is simply with a 2-1 victory, then he will not be getting any advantage, and it will be an even playing field. So there's reasons for Baron to want to win this, and there's reasons for Bubbles to want to win this, and there's reasons for Birdo to want Baron to win this. But yeah, this is sort of all on the line here. And the format that these players will be competing in this final match, this final week of the group stage, is, well, you have the regular old restrictions on the decks, which is no cards allowed in multiple decks. This means that if you have a card in one deck, that card cannot appear in any of your 4 other deck lists, regardless of rarity, regardless of number that you run in that first deck. And also, all reserved cards are allowed, so every single card that's ever been printed is completely legal in this format. And then the special rules for this week is all of your decks must contain either exclusively even or exclusively odd cost cards on a deck-by-deck basis. And, I mean, if you didn't get to watch yesterday's games, you should definitely go back and watch it after the stream, because we saw some absolutely crazy games. We saw some even decks taking wins. We saw odd decks taking wins. We saw aggro odd, we saw control odd, we saw control even. There's really a bunch of different ways you can do this with nation combinations. And once we get into the decks, you will see that the decks we have here today are incredibly spicy. These players really going, thinking outside of the box here on these format restrictions. And of course, it's going to be 5 decks with a ban, best of 7. Conquest format, meaning that you have to win with all of your non-banned decks to win the total match. And who do we have competing here today? Well, as mentioned, we have Baron von Glower, who, despite coming into this tournament with the least tournament experience and the sort of the worst win rate in the tournaments that he has appeared in, and just the underdog by all counts. All measurable counts headed into this. Baron absolutely was the underdog, but he's currently our front runner, winning both of his matches over Birdo Burrito and Killswitch, who have much more tournament experience. And this is showing a lot how it comes down to, it's not simply about piloting skills, and it's not that Baron doesn't have piloting skills, but it comes down to deck building, and in a format that allows you to better express deck building skill, Baron is going to shine, because Baron is somebody who will always come with his own decks. He will come with something spicy, and it doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it's harder to be very spicy in a completely played through standard meta where you have less cards to play around with. You're sort of less creative thinking required, and people are just going to copy the decks that they've played 1,000 games with on ladder. Baron's going to come in with something new, and that gives them some advantage, but the decks are probably just not going to be as good. But in this format, where everybody is sort of forced out of their comfort zone, Baron thrives in this area, and he has thrived so far in this tournament, and he will be trying to thrive here today and win his 3rd match to potentially gain that advantage in the finals. Bear, I think this is your first time casting Baron, is that correct?
It is, yeah. I have not been able to cast Baron's previous matches. I know Baron a bit. I have my association with Team Heavy, which is kind of known. I've done quite a few practice sessions with him. I have experienced firsthand his particular brand of deck building. And it has legitimately, I think, been a big factor in this, is that he has not been afraid to take big risks in his deck building. And sometimes you can absolutely crash and burn, but he really hasn't at all in this. He's built some wild decks and they've worked, and hey, spoilers, he's not disappointing this time around. His is the list that actually got me to raise an eyebrow and then actually have to go and check that I was reading the correct deck lists. And yeah, I think it's fascinating to see him in the position that he is based on that. But yeah, he's definitely a bit of a wild card, but also he is a very competent pilot. But I agree with you. I think this off kilter evolving meta suits him in a way that I think would suit very few other people. I mean, I know for a fact I would be terrible in it.
Yeah. Baron definitely has some very spicy decks, and we will be getting into that. For anybody who wants to see these spicy decks ahead of time, or the decks that were played yesterday, or any of the decks that were played in the previous 2 weeks, you can type !deck lists in Twitch chat, and that will pull up the link for you. As well as there is a different command, !giveaway, and that will enter you into the giveaway. It is now working, so if you typed it and you did not get a Moobot response telling you that you are entered into the giveaway, it means you are not entered and you should type it again. So make sure that, it's working now. So yeah, enter into the giveaway to win 150 or 300 gold. Which I will be sending you in the form of a code at the end of the stream. Make sure Twitch Whispers are on. But the player that Baron is going to be going up against, and the player who has the chance to upset Baron's perfect record here, is Innocent Bubbles, and Innocent Bubbles is definitely no stranger to some pretty spicy deck building himself. He's sort of a bit of a balanced player in the middle of bringing very spicy decks, and he's definitely leaned into the creativity side of deck building, even in tournaments before. But he's also a player who's not afraid to play the meta sometimes. He's not afraid to just simply bring what he knows is going to work best. And that balance has worked out pretty well for him. He is sitting here in second position in the current leaderboards, and he has the opportunity to take down Baron and potentially even take first on the leaderboards overall here. And I mean, Bubbles, look at that 50% game win rate in tournaments. He is going even across 10 different tournaments. And that's not simply just 10 tournaments in a row over the last year. That is 10 tournaments over the course of basically since OCCs have been happening. All sorts of different metas, all sorts of different players he's playing against. And across that, he has gone even with the best players across all these different metas. Bubbles is definitely somebody with a wealth of cards experience, and he's going to be bringing that to the table in this sort of bizarre format, playing these decks outside of the regular comfort zone. And, I mean, what else is there to really say about Innocent Bubbles, Bear? Do you have anything to add about your fellow Brit here?
I mean, aside from the fact that he's one of the single nicest human beings I have ever interacted with, but also temperament is something that I think gets missed about Bubbles. Bubbles has, because he does a lot of casting and is involved in a lot of the face of the game, I think people miss how effectively he remains chilled. He's a very composed player. I've not known him massively get super tilted in my experience. And as you say, he's over his rather long and storied career in cards. He's seen everything. Bubbles was there with me playing through the Jet meta and did exceptionally well in it. And that was, believe me, a tilting time for everyone. We were talking about this before the stream. Someone that way managed to miss out on it because he was, I don't know, loitering doing something unimportant after winning Worlds, but the rest of us were in the trenches with jets flying over the top of us. But no, I think the key with Bubbles is he adapts to whatever's around there, and part of that is exactly what you say, a balance between trying new things but also holding on to things that he knows are tried and tested, and some people might call them vanilla or just generic, but honestly, anyone who's been playing cards for a long time will tell you neither of those words are an insult when you're trying to say stable in a complex meta. But yeah, Bubbles might be in with a quiet chance here. He's very good at what he does, and 50% win rate against some of the best players in the entire world over the length of this game is not nothing.
Yeah, and I think you make a very good point about Bubbles not really as being as vulnerable or susceptible to getting tilted as a lot of other players. And I'll just add to that from my own experience is Bubbles also has a specialty in tilting his opponents. He is proactive in his use of just mental warfare in the game. And I mean, Bubbles is also like he's a great person. He's not going to break that out against just anybody. But I know he's good friends with everybody in this tournament. And when he's playing against his good friends, he's going to be more willing to do sort of unconventional psychological warfare against his opponents, throwing out a well-timed emote when something goes his way, is all part of the game. And I'm not sure if we'll see that coming out here from Bubbles or not, but that's definitely something in his playbook that, I mean, even the most like solid like strength of willed players, if they go up against Bubbles and you know he's like laughing in his chair there watching this happen, he's throwing out the emotes, he will get under your skin and try to get you, and it's not just to, you know, make you angry, but it's when you get angry, when you get upset, that's when you start making mistakes, and that's when things can turn in Bubbles' favor. So it's all part of the game. So we'll see if Bubbles is going to be doing that type of sort of implementing that type of strategy here. But now let's get into straight into the decks here. And the first deck we have up from Baron von Glower is a Japan-Soviet push OTK. A obviously odd because Red Dawn and push are both odd. But you know what is even, which means he can't run in this deck, is every single piece of healing that he could have run in this deck. There is 0 healing anywhere in this deck, meaning that to do the full push combo, you need to be at 13 health or higher, meaning if he takes 7 damage over the course of this game, he will just simply die. Now, he does have ways of dealing some amount of burn damage without the Red Dawns, so he does have the Signal Regiment in this deck. Under Fire can deal chip damage face. Obviously, Dina can attack face, and he can get some early chip damage in with an early Type 94, for example. So he doesn't necessarily need to do the full combo. If he can deal enough chip damage early, he can push from 10 health or higher. But this deck is definitely very vulnerable to just taking too much damage and simply being unable to win the game anymore. But to get around that, there is 3 copies of Snowstorm, 2 copies of Force Surrender, a heap of Pin to combo with that Force Surrender, and then there is a it's not really enough to call it a self-credit denial theme because there's no payoff cards. There's just simply 2 copies of Air, Land, and Sea and 2 copies of the 40th Cavalry, and this will let him get into his deck deeper, get extra copies of these Red Dawns and these pushes, making it easier to find these cards in his hand, and then the 40th Cavalry will reduce its cost, and it might lose you a credit, but if it's reducing the cost of 2 Red Dawns and a push, going from a 5 credit combo to a 2 credit combo, well, suddenly losing 1 credit slot is absolutely worth that. So this deck is capable of comboing incredibly early. You can even do something like dropping the first Red Dawn on your own 40th Cavalry to then reduce the cost of the other combo pieces in your hand to play that turn. So this deck, could combo off on like turn 6, or it could take 7 damage or 8 damage by turn 6 and be physically incapable of winning the game anymore. It's a classic Baron, very high risk, very high reward. Baron, I know Bear, I've seen you've been making faces about Baron's deck here.
I played this thing. I love this thing. This thing is one of the most pure combo engines I have ever witnessed. And it uses interactions that are frankly terrifying if they work. Like Deadly Duty onto your own 40th Cavalry whilst you've got first signals on the board to ping your opponent's HQ, reduce the cost of the orders that you have in hand, which you've garnered via using Air, Land, and Sea, whilst at the same time, just the key here is that this relies on being able to hold your opponent off long enough to pop off. But if you pop off, there's so little you can do because this thing is a mathematical engine. It is, if it gets where it wants to go, its victory is in effect a mathematical certainty. I do, however, have to call out Baron, who knows I love him to pieces, for the level of lunacy required to run this deck with literally 0 healing. There's something truly, truly impressive about this. Like, the last line on my notes is, if your HQ goes low, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah, exactly. We saw Birdo yesterday bringing a self-damage deck that had no healing. And at least self-damage, if you're on 1 health, you're still alive and you're still winning, and you've probably cheated out like 20 worth of stats onto the board. This deck, you hit 12 health and you're probably lost. Like... you essentially start the game on 8 health, if you think about it that way. And looking at the way this deck works, you have 4 guards with a combined 8 health and no healing, and then you have additional cards like Winter Warfare that can damage yourself in a way that might not be beneficial. Suddenly thinking about this deck having 8 health is like, oh, wait a second. But Baron is taking that risk. I'm incredibly excited to see this deck in action, because I honestly don't know how to evaluate this deck. I could see this deck losing 5 games in a row, or 4 games in a row, if it just simply, you just take 7 damage, or you take 8 damage, and then you lose the game.
I mean, yeah, but in fairness, I could also see this deck eating a ban if someone looks at it and just goes, no.
That is true. And it's also possible that if this deck doesn't eat a ban, it could just win on turn 5. Like, there's a world where Baron just simply, on turn 5, he red dots his own 40th Cavalry, then Air, Land, and Sea into another push for free, and then second red dot for free, and then 2k push, 3k push, wins the game.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. My actual win rate, and I don't normally talk about this on this in testing, I played 7 games of this in testing. I won 3, lost 4, and the 3 I won were all pre-turn 6.
That is absolutely filthy. So let's move on to Baron's second deck here, which is going to be a Germany-Japan odd Very, very aggressive deck. We see a lot of the blitz tanks coming in here. We see the double blitzkrieg. We see all the blitz infantry one drops from Japan. This is just an incredibly aggressive deck. It's just sort of low to the ground, and it's just going to try to take the front line, drop an early blitzkrieg, and end the game very, very fast. It's a similar style to the odd Jagro decks that we saw from Killswitch and Birdo earlier. Obviously, those decks that don't have the explosive Blitzkrieg, they do have a bit more draw power with the expansions. But the philosophy in this format is quite similar, which is just there's going to be a lot of really heavy decks, probably. Like, it's difficult to build a control deck, and with 5 decks you need to bring, there's going to be some control. So if you just bring this deck, it's just going to roll over any control deck most likely, because by the time they're playing their thing on turn 3, you've dealt 8 damage, and then you drop a 3-unit Blitzkrieg and kill them through a guard. Yeah, this deck looks incredibly good, and yeah, it just looks like a very strong deck. This is a much more normal deck, I think, coming out here from Bear.
Yeah, I mean 100%. This deck is just blunt force trauma. It's not fancy. It's not technical. It's not pretty. It is just what we would in the UK. We have a phrase called "playing soccer the Vindaloo way," which is it doesn't matter as long as I score one more than you do. It doesn't matter if I win 4-0 or 20-11 or 9-8. Who cares as long as I win? And this is pretty much the ethos that you will get here. This deck does not care about anything other than just tearing holes in you at 1,000 miles an hour. But I will say it's not completely blunt force, because you have got things like suppression, and suppression is one of those cards that I think people are getting more and more switched on to at the minute, because you don't have to go all air to get value out of suppression. You just need one decent air unit, and Arado can go fishing for your suppression to get suppress and a draw, and that could be critical, because that could go through. Suppression doesn't care what you like. I have won one game in testing, which was the most satisfying game I won in testing on this. I had an Arado on, dropped an Arado, pulled suppression while there was a guard on the board. Then suppression drew me into Blitzkrieg while removing the guard, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, this deck is incredibly powerful, and I mean, you don't even necessarily need to get the draw off suppression if you're killing your opponent. Like, if you have the Blitzkrieg in hand and don't have the errata, you can just do suppression, not draw, Blitzkrieg, go face through a guard. But then there's other ways to get around the guard with this Hipper and Yag Bomber on the top end of the deck, which are just, I mean, both of these cards are incredibly, incredibly powerful tempo swings coming down on turn 5. That can just sort of blow any control deck out of the water here. So
Yeah.
let's move on to deck number 3, and this is a Brit-Soviet air deck. And I mean, we saw the Brit-German air deck before. Brit-Soviet, what it's bringing to the table with the odd package is the 2 copies of Sickle, 3 copies of Claim the Sky, and the Petliakov. And I mean, Claim the Sky is just a crazy card. Just an absolutely bonkers card, and I would not be surprised if this sees a ban. We saw that previous air deck eat a ban because it's an air deck with Monty and Shellin. It's just an incredibly powerful deck. And Baron is also including in here the Lend-Lease. I think the last air deck didn't have Lend-Lease because that was being used in a different deck. This deck has the Lend-Lease, it has the MI5, it has the 4 Convoy. This deck is going to be able to essentially reach the bottom of its deck 100% of the time. It's going to have a strong opening curve, but it's also going to have sticking power with this Wrath Lightning. And yeah, it's just an absolutely nasty deck, and I mean, we saw the first deck, and the first deck raises some huge question marks. But deck number 2 and deck number 3 are just very, very efficient, aggressive decks that are here to punish any sort of control deck. And we saw punishing control deck is exactly what happened to Killswitch yesterday, where Killswitch had 2 control decks that raised a few question marks, and across those 2 control decks, he lost 4 games. He got swept. He won with his 2 aggressive decks and then lost 4 consecutive games on those the 2 different control decks. And Baron is basically just saying, like, okay, Bubbles, do you have any bad control decks? Because I'm here to absolutely punish them.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is incredibly tightly built. And it's It's doing something that is really, really well understood and functional. With just a couple of little things in there that can niggle at you. I mean, anytime you're playing against this deck and you see MI5 come down, it just makes you feel miserable because the inverse draw equations just suck. But I mean, the one thing I will say is I often talk about in deck building this general rule that's been around since Magic the Gathering that if you haven't got enough draw in your deck to see about 50 to 55% of your deck by about a third of the way into the game, you probably haven't got enough draw. That is not a problem that this deck has. This deck will find whatever card it wants as long as you can make space, and it's got plenty of ways to make space. I mean, Monty's ridiculous. HMS Illustrious is never to be underestimated in an air deck because anytime you see HMS Illustrious, close air support, you really think, okay. But nowadays, you can see HMS Illustrious, close air support, close air support. Oh, they've only got one credit left. Crap, they have claimed the skies. And seriously, it's another deck that I mean. So if I've said this, we're saying it 3 times in a row. It's another deck that could very easily ban. I wouldn't want Bubbles' job figuring out which one of these I want to ban. Can I ban all 3 of them, please?
Yeah, by my count, this deck has 23 card draw across it, which means by turn 10, you could theoretically have drawn your entire deck if you have spent the credits, if you have had the credits to spend on all of that card draw. That means, like, by turn 12, easily, you will see basically 90% of your deck, or at the very least have access to 100% of your deck, should you want to be spending the credits on that. And that's if they just haven't won on turn 5 with the regular Swordfish, Gladiator, cast. So, yeah, this
Yeah,
deck absolutely nasty. This is just bringing us back to the heyday of Brit Air. And also, we saw yesterday both players sort of is leaning away from cards like Flam Hands or from Pack 40, from Sudden Strikes. We didn't really see this early game removal because it's sort of less confident on how much early game like this you're going to be seeing. And without that type of removal, I think most control decks are just not capable of answering this. This is just going to be a free win against most control
yeah, it's
decks.
just going to run you over. Unless you have removal, this deck just runs you over.
Now, let's move on to deck number 3, or number 4 here, sorry. And this is going to be Even Germany. And Even Germany is something that we saw from both players in the previous set, and that is something that Baron is bringing here today. But if you look at the 6-cost cards in this deck, there is no Jet prototypes. There is 3 FW, there is Comet, there is 2 Monsoon Rot, which is a very interesting inclusion, because there isn't really a way to deal 1 damage to all enemies. The closest thing you have is Root Out. And Monsoon Root Out is a 2-card 10 credit combination that we're probably not seeing. So the Monsoon Rots here are a big question mark to me. But the biggest question mark is definitely the choice to not include Jet Prototype. Now, we saw Killswitch bring a odd German-Britain discard deck. This does not lean into the discard at all. This is just a German-Britain mid-range deck. You have some value generation with the Blitz Doctrines, the Off-Clorungs. You have some pieces of removal with the Skybearers and the Root Out. Some good guards like the Seaforth Highlanders. I forgot how much I hate that card. Um, and then on top of the Off-Clorung, he runs 1 copy of Hit the Drop Point, 1 copy of Evasive Action, 1 copy of Unexpected Resistance. This deck is just nasty. This deck is just looks absolutely miserable to play against. We see 3 copies of the Sudden Strike coming out here. This is, I think, a very well constructed slower deck. I think the choice to go even here is just a generally good one. But he's saying I don't need the War Machines. I can just simply run good 2-cost cards and fight for the board against aggro decks. I think those 0-cost countermeasures are going to come into play against decks like Jagro, just trying to slow down the blitz things. And yeah, overall, this deck looks very, very well built. And completely frankly, I don't think this deck needs Jet. I don't think Jet would be a good inclusion in this deck. Now, is this deck better than had he just done a, say, German-Soviet or a German-US even Jet deck like we saw from Killswitch and Birdo? I'm not sure. But with the Brit
Yeah,
ally and the Britain cards he wants to include in this deck, I don't think Jet is wrong, and that means Baron is not bringing Jet to the even odd format, which is absolutely crazy. He brought 2 German decks and no Jet.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the moxie of it. It's like, yeah, everybody thinks instantly Jet, and Baron's like, eh, eh, it's not that, it's not that big a deal. It's fine. But no, I mean, I open my notes on this with just all kinds of annoying to play. You already see in an open list 3 0 cost countermeasures. One thing you never want to see in open lists is 0 cost countermeasures because you can't account for them. Then you've got two Alfclarung, which can quite happily generate yet more countermeasures that you can't predict. Um, this is a frustrating deck. I 100% agree with you. I honestly believe that Jet would make this deck worse because it just gives you a really strong chance of pitching cards that you really want to see. Because this deck is full of cards that you want to see. You want to see Root Out. You actually want to see things like 96th. You definitely want to see Comet. You also really want to get the pop from your 64 Panzer Grenadier if you can, because that little extra credit acceleration isn't small. And Honey is sat there going, just in case anyone wants to do anything silly, I'm just going to include a little bit of healing just to remind you that I'm still around. And obviously, two copies of Blitz Doctrine, which is, I think, a brave call in a deck that doesn't run credit acceleration nowadays. Not heavy credit acceleration, as I say. We've got 64 Panzer Grenadier, but I have been a big proponent of you really kind of need Ramp and or Reichsbank for Blitz Doctrine nowadays. But Baron may be about to prove me very wrong, because this looks, as I say, literally just all kinds of annoying to play. And yes, I'm going to say it again. We've reached deck 4, and I still look at this and would seriously consider banning it, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, Baron really just showing up here with. When I first looked at his deck lists, when I was making these images, just looking over, making sure everything was all tickety boo here, I was I was looking through the deck list and like just sort of skimming through them. I was like, these decks look really questionable. Like, I'm really questioning the choices Baron brought. Like, is he just coasting because he only needs to win a single game to guarantee his place in the final? But now that I've had a bit more time to stew on it, I'm like seeing it in its entirety. Um, Honestly, I think these lineups are much better than I originally gave them credit for, and I think this is actually a very well constructed line. That first deck, I'm still not sold on the idea of the Japan Soviet push deck with no healing. I'm very skeptical of that. But the three decks that have preceded that look absolutely filthy, and decks that I would 100% consider banning. And the one questionable deck is a deck that is capable of winning on like turn 5, if not sooner, as you mentioned. And if that's the deck you have 4 chances to win on, presumably there's a higher than 25% chance you just get a nasty opener and kill your opponent before they have any chance of doing anything against you. So based on what Baron's fifth deck is going to be, this could just be could be Baron in being in a very, very good spot just based off the deck lists. So let's take a look at his fifth deck, and it's going to be the only US main deck out of the 20 decks from our players for this week. In even odds format, the other 3 players all looked at US and said, I do not want that. Not a single of the other 3 players brought US main at all. And Baron is looking at that and says, you know what? I want US main. I'm doing US main with even. Obviously, you want the War Machines, you want the 5th Rangers, you want the Shermans, you want the Strategic Bombings, you want the Fire Bombs. Really, really powerful deck with some very powerful even US cards. And then for ally, he picked Japan, and I think this is very, very, very good choice because you have some very powerful Japanese support cards that you're not running in the odd Jagro list, or in Baron's case, the odd push OTK Jagro list. Instead, he's running the 24th Cavalries. These are just going to be good early game, trade out things, get pull more out of your deck. The Aichi is just a nasty card that I was quite surprised to not see any of yesterday. Dragon Slayer, of course, can come down on 3 with War Machine. Southern Plan can come down on 3 with War Machine. The 61st brings a little bit more guard and a little bit of healing into the deck. And then Winter Regiment is just a nasty, nasty card for battling to the front line. So honestly, if this deck hits a War Machine on 2, I think this deck is favored against virtually anything, except for like maybe an air deck, for example. But you have a ban, and this deck looks just absolutely beautiful. And especially love the 2 copies of Embargo. Baron has talked a lot to me about them. He really wants Embargo to win him a game. He thinks this is a card that everybody else sort of underrates. So we'll see how this works. Bear, what are your thoughts on this list?
I mean, this is the list I spent the longest time going into to actually start to understand the mind of the person that built this deck. Because this deck is way better built than, like, many of these decks are, but this deck and all the others are way better built than they look on first glance. I'm not surprised that you took a look at them and did wonder and then came back to it. I had the advantage that I had like a whole free hour when the deck lists were sent to me and I was able to sit and read them. There are things about this deck that are horrifying, and I will say, do not underestimate the value of the fact that this deck can drop 2 Southern Plan and a Strategic Bombing, all of which are credit denial. And then it can pop like P40, which then makes your things more expensive to operate. This deck can punish you just for existing. And at the same time, it can be building up a nice little bit of ramp. Seeing the M4A2 is always interesting. We've got the A2 and the A1. I don't know whether that's for symmetry or just for the heck of it. I love the fact that you reach that point. I believe Baron reached that point where he's like, I've got everything I want, and I've got 3 slots left, and I have access to 24th Cavalry, and that card is hugely underrated as a way to avoid putting cards you don't want in your deck and being able to get rid of them, because they thin themselves, and that never hurts. Yeah, and again, 142nd has the potential to be really irritating. Yeah, again, this deck will be all about trading well and credit denial, but it can certainly do it. Yeah, I was surprised by this, but I think it's going to be a bit of a pain to shift if it gets itself in position.
Yeah, this deck looks again it's just a very good choice. I think leading into the even for the control decks, or just the slower decks, I should say, really seems to be the way to go. It reminds me a bit of the German Brit deck in that it's not quite control, but it's definitely slower than aggro. It's running enough 2-drops to compete early in the game, and then it's just sort of running the really good 4 and 6 cost cards, and that's how it's going to win. It doesn't need 8-drops, it doesn't need 10-drops, it doesn't need anything big like that. And it sort of makes me wonder if maybe the even for the slower decks is the way to go rather than we saw him trying to make the odd slower decks work. Maybe just hitting the 2 is far more powerful than the 1 and the 3, because there's not a lot of good 1-drops in cards that for a slower deck. So yeah, let's move on now to the decks he's going to be playing against from Bubbles. Because obviously, we looked at Baron's decks, and we talked about how frustrating they look to play against, how much you want to ban them, how solid of a lineup they look. But if Innocent Bubbles has a carbon copy of Baron's decks, then it's still an even matchup. Now, obviously, he doesn't have a carbon copy of his decks, but if he has a solid 5-deck lineup of his own, we are in for a hell of a match. So let's take a look at Innocent Bubbles' first deck, and it's going to be a Soviet-Japan even control list, and you can already see their minds are quite similar, because we did see Japan even from either player yesterday, and here already both of them have Japan even for the slower deck, bringing in some of the same cards, both with 2 Winter Regiments, both with 2 Southern Clans. Now, Bubbles, because he doesn't have the War Machine, he's running a bit more 2-drops. He's running for Glory, which I think is just a wonderful piece of removal. The Kurume Regiment just to slow his opponent down. Island Defense, we've talked so much about decks not running Island Defense. Now we finally have a deck with Island Defense. Takasagi and Sendai Regiment are also just great cards for 4. Particularly Sendai Regiment on Jets can be really, really good, because even if they kill the Sendai, the Jet will come back with the 5 operation cost. And then on top of that, you have the sort of Soviet control package that we saw from Berto in Berto's even Soviet control deck yesterday, with the Scorched Earths, the Spy Rings, the Bryansk's, and just some really, really nasty cards. Maybe going a bit heavier on the top end with the 272nd and the winter offensive, on top of the 336th cavalries, and 3 T60s. So this deck has a ton of value in it, and maybe a bit of sacrificing a little bit on the anti-aggro side. Obviously, there's no copies of the mobile defense, but Karume is going to more than make up for that. Do you have anything else you want to say about this deck? When you played this deck, how do you think it fared?
If you get a decent mulligan, this deck can hold on long enough through kind of Bryansk and Kurume to start doing what it wants to do. If it starts doing what it wants to do, there really is next to nothing your opponent can do about it, because the control tools in this deck are insanely strong. I like things like Red Banner for generating big units later in the game. That could pay off hugely, because again, we've got Red Banner into 36 Cavalry, which I talked about last cast. Spiring, never a bad include, because you can just pop it off and wait to see whether you get some good value or not. Win con, it is a bit of a gamble, but, you know, this deck can afford it. As I say, the biggest problem with this deck is if you stall out on your mulligan and you end up with a truly bad hand, like most slow control decks, you do run the risk of getting rolled. But this is a legitimately good control deck that, again, feeds into one of Bubble's biggest strengths, which is playing flexibly, because this requires you to play and adjust your use of tools to what's on the board, which is, I would imagine, something Bubbles knows he can do very well. I love this deck. I'm excited to see it see play if it doesn't eat a ban. I don't think it will, because control decks aren't that scary as a rule, but it's solid. And also the Sendai to deal with Jet is always nice to see.
However, there is no Jet coming out from his opponent, so
No,
we might see.
sad thing.
Yeah, if now, like, when it comes to building these lineups, when there's sort of one deck that stands out in the format like Jet does, you either build your lineup under the assumption, I'm just going to ban Jet, and I'm not going to think about it whatsoever in how I build my decks, or you're going to say, I'm going to target Jet, I'm going to ban something else, and then I'm going to try to make all of my decks be able to beat Jet. And based on this deck, it's a little hard to say which direction Bubbles went with so far. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a odd Soviet control list. Now, obviously, we know the lists, but just the debate between even and odd Soviet control is, I think, harder than any other nation, because, like, Jaggro, obviously you're doing odd Jaggro. Like German midrange, obviously you're doing even German midrange.
Yeah.
Soviet control, odd or even, it's such a tough choice, because on even you have the Scorched Earths, you have the Bryansks, you have the First Rifles, you have Partisans, Winter Regiment, the Naval Brigade, the 272nd, but then on odd, you have the Bloody Sickle, the Depths of Winter, the Armored Train, the Strategic Focus. Like, there's just so many cards you want to put into this deck, and half of the cards you want are even, and half of the cards you want are odd. And is that enough to make two good decks? Is that not enough to make one good deck? Who's to say? But we've seen Soviet control here. From three of our players, and obviously it worked really well for Birdo yesterday. It did not work well for Killswitch yesterday. So maybe that's a sign that even is the way to go for this. And in that case, Bubbles definitely has the right deck here. But now let's move on to deck number 2. And I mean, this seeing Japan with a bunch of one-cost cards is not shocking for this format. We've seen every player do Japan with one-cost cards. Now that we've seen some very different Japan decks, one with no ally cards, one with push and red dons. However, this is going to be Japan US aggro, similar to what Birdo brought, but with a few key distinctions. I absolutely love this copy, 2 copies of the Grumman Goose. Grumman Goose can draw so many cards in this deck. And obviously this deck has the expansions, it has the Free Freedoms, it doesn't lack card draw, it's not reliant on Grumman Goose, which is good, because there's some ways for your opponent to deal with it, or just certain boards where Grumman Goose isn't going to draw any cards. but this deck is capable of just dumping 1-drops on the board and then suddenly drawing 4, 5, 6 cards, and then that is going to make things like Honorable Death, like these Type 93s to buff attack, just absolutely brutal for your opponent. There's just going to be wave after wave of cards, and then of course you have the Sheedan and the 1-of copy of Naval Supply run for a bit of burst at the end of that, if you can ever stick any units on board, or at the very least keep the HQ open from any guards. This deck is just almost certainly going to get across the line. This is the type of deck that you just already mark down for a win, which, yeah, I mean, this deck just looks absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I mean, this is your kind of take it to the bank deck. I agree with you. I too am a huge fan of running the goose when you've got the potential to have a wide board, and it's even more disgusting when you have bicycle boys, because bicycle boys, like if you got two bicycle boys on and they can both swing, that's 4 cards plus the one that it draws itself on the attack. It is the ultimate refill in a deck that can throw literally everything on and then refill its hand, throw most of that on, and then click and go, I've still got another turn next time. Obviously, the usual weaknesses that you will find in any aggro deck, but it is just a beautifully built aggro deck, and it is almost certainly going to find itself a winning deck. And it's also one of those decks that's almost certainly not going to get banned because everybody kind of expects it, and there are bigger fish to fry as a rule in your deck lists. It's not that I don't want to talk about this deck, but there's not a lot to say beyond it's just going to hit you in the face really hard.
I will say 2 cards that we've seen so far have made me sort of planted a thought in my mind. The Groom and Goose here and the hit the drop point from Baron makes me wonder, no player actually brought a covert archetype deck, but if you think about the covert cards, covert runs off of the 1k Deuce and then all of the 3k covert operations. That's sort of perfect for an odd deck. I'm actually just thinking back, I remember when thinking of these formats, at the time I was playing a covert deck on ladder, and my covert deck on ladder already had like 35 odd cost cards. So I was like, this would not be that difficult to convert into an odd deck. Now, maybe that's why Baron brought the hit the drop point. Maybe he thought that maybe there will be covert units coming out as a potential archetype. Now, we did not see that coming out from any of our players, but I believe this is our first covert unit that we have seen in the Groom and Goose, and it's looking excellent in this deck. So even if we're not seeing any covert archetypes, definitely the players had covert units in mind for odd decks. So now let's move on to deck number 3 here, and this is a Britain-Italy control list, and this list is just absolutely nuts in terms of just its raw control power. I have played many a Brit-Italy list in my day where you go into the collection and you search up guard, you put in everything, you search up HQ, you put in everything, and then you search up like 1 or 2 pieces of removal. You throw that in, you throw in some card draw, and then you basically have 40 cards in the deck. Works well enough. And it seems that Bubbles had a very similar thought, obviously restricted to only odd cards, but you know, he has Convoys and the MI5s, the Bologna Regiments, the Devil's Brigade, Glamour Boys, Monty Shelling, Carpet Bombs, Decimas, 3 copies of Lend-Lease. This deck will never run out of cards. And then for even more late game, there's the Lancaster, there's the Wellington, the Co-Belligerents, Naval Engagement, and 2 Decimas. This deck is incredibly heavy, and on the one hand, you look at this deck with very few 1-drops, and we saw these odd control decks sort of failing to get across the line for kill switch. And it looks like maybe this could be in the same place. The big difference is this deck has Monty, it has the supply shortages. First Responders is an absolutely nasty card. This deck is going to be able to slam down a huge guard on turn 3 or 4, basically 100% of the time. And if not, it's a supply shortage, but most of the time it might even be in combination with a supply shortage on the following turn. So this deck is absolutely capable of keeping up with aggro in the first few turns, and then once you hit turn 5, you're just slamming down Glamour Boys, Shelling, Carpet Bombing, another Glamour Boys, because why not? And you know, if at any point you're sort of in a situation where you're like, oh, I need a board clear, or I need to find healing, or I need to find ultra, or I need to find guard, there's just so much card draw in this deck on top of all of the guard and healing that you will certainly be able to find any tools you need if you're given the time to use it.
Yeah, I mean the things you can also buy that time to use them. So things that big includes that I want to pick out. I'm not going to go over what J King's already said. He's spot on. The dagger strikes is an unbelievably potent tool if your opponent has one big threat, because it's usually the highest damage thing on the board, and the dagger strikes just says, I don't care, it just blows up. However, if it gets a bit awkward, I'd like to point out that you have 3 copies of Number 9 Commando and 2 copies of Devil's Brigade, and that's not an accident. That is an incredibly potent removal combination. Granted, the traditional version would be Number 9 Commando's Albacore, but of course you can't do that in this because Albacore's a 2-cost card. But Number 9 Commandos into Devil's Brigade is terrifying. And the rest of it, just this deck wants to make you miserable. That is its entire purpose in life.
Yeah. Um, I have to say, a somewhat surprising absence from this deck is often what a lot of players have been doing with Britain Control is just like a fun package to include is these number 9 commandos and these devil brigades, which are both commando unit types, and then you include resourcefulness to hit them slightly more consistently because they're just very good units. They're definitely cards that you are happy to tutor out of your deck. And then you also maybe include 1 or 2 copies of Baker Street Irregulars just for a little bit of extra develop to sort of fish for specific cards geared towards your current board state and situation. And all resourcefulness and Baker Street Irregulars are both odd cost cards that would also lower the curve a bit. So I'm quite surprised that we didn't see maybe like a couple lend leases taken out in favor of resourcefulness. You lowered your total draw, but maybe Bubbles thought that there would be a bit more heavy control lists like that we saw from Killswitch coming out. Now, obviously, we've seen Baron's decks. Baron's decks are a bit faster. However, I think this deck would be, the way Bubbles has built it, would be quite well suited to go up into Killswitch's lineup, maybe less so into Baron's, but there's just still so much guard and HQ and pin and board clears and removal that maybe Baron feels the need to just say, you know what, this deck looks just kind of gross to go up against. It's also got a lot of healing, which is going to make the push OTK deck essentially impossible to beat this if you can get 2 Glamour Boys down and the game's over, basically. So yeah, this deck is still, even if it's not necessarily the best ever into Bubbles' lineup, it's still looking good enough that it's going to get some wins if it's not banned, and it might even eat a ban. Um,
Yeah.
but now let's go on to deck number 4 from Innocent Bubbles. This is going to be an odd Germany deck. So this is Germany US. We saw Baron with the Germany Japan odd aggro deck. This is a Germany US odd aggro deck. Again, running just fairly similar cards. This is a bit more into the tank focus. We see the Fast Hinds. We see the Panzer 3F. So this is going to be a bit more tank heavy. Scout cars and Hellcats and half tracks coming out from the US alongside the combat engineers. So yeah, this is quite similar. They even have the same top end of Hipper, Jägerbomber, 2 copies of 20th Panzer Grenadiers. I mean, this is just a very, very solid, aggressive deck. I mean, between this and Baron's Germany Japan, which one do you think you would give the edge? Not necessarily in a mirror match, but just overall in a lineup. How do you think the 2 decks fare into each other? Because obviously there's quite a bit of overlap between the types of cards they're running.
You don't mind a hard question, do you? um, I have to say, I think I would probably favour this very slightly because it has got a couple of things in it that are available because of rotation that are not to be underestimated. Red Devils being in this deck is a huge pain in the backside. By the way, Red Devils and M20 Scout Car being in the same deck is something you really don't want to see, because the last thing you ever want to see is being forced to deal with the Scout Car because the Red Devils is too expensive to trade into, then making the Red Devils bigger. I love the inclusion of the Dornier as long as you play it well. It can be a nightmare because it can end up pushing things to the front line you don't want to, but it can also do things like throw your but play down like a half track that otherwise is really just knocking something off the board. Now it's knocking something off the board and putting an all right body in the front line. Greif, Hines, obviously that tells you a lot about the deck, and the KFZ truck is always going to be there as a threat to just nip forward and make it punch. But yeah, I think this is just fractionally, and it is only fractionally, I think, more consistent than the Germany Japan variant.
All right, thank you for that. Now let's move on to the final deck, and I don't think this is going to shock many people. It is going to be we just saw the Germany-US odd aggro deck. This is going to be Germany-US even Jet deck. We see 3 copies of the Jet, 4 copies of War Machine, 2 copies of Duress. This is going old school, and just, running exactly the cards you would think in this deck, with a few notable inclusions of cards, of newer cards or changed cards with shifting attack and the 2 copies of the Pack 40. So this is definitely not just like pulling it out of the archive from some dusty Google Drive folder somewhere. It is updated to the current patch, what has been buffed, what has been nerfed. Also a few notable inclusions that have never really intersected with this deck due to classic mode, with 2 copies of Root Out in Jet. I really like this inclusion just to stop this deck from being rolled over by Jagro. You can War Machine into Root Out, because sort of the way to beat this deck, one of the ways to beat this deck is simply just try to go under it. It's somewhat difficult to get those 2-for-1s. The big card for getting a good 2-for-1 early in the game is Devil's Brigade, which can't be run in this deck due to the even inclusion. So this deck is really just taking things out one at a time, and if it's not doing anything until turn 3 at the minimum, taking things out one at a time is quite slow. So Bubbles does have the necessary anti-aggro tools in here with the sudden strikes, the 1097 Volks Grenadiers that can be the 2/5 guard against aggro. Firebomb is also another great inclusion here. And then on the top end is just exactly what you would expect with the Jets, the FWs, the Comet.
Yeah, I mean, I want to point out a few things that Jet really has no business ever having access to. Verbal Wind, Root Out, Pack 40. Jet does not need that help. Jet's plenty fine with just some more generic support. Fifth Rangers obviously was around at the time, but I mean, Pack 40 I think is a genius include, because Pack 40 is, for my money, one of the most effective removal tools in the game right now, because you're getting removal that hits 1 or 2 cost cards, which is most of the stuff you want to hit, and an arty that has ambush. But yeah, I mean, this is a brutally efficient version of Jet Prototype, and I would not be at all surprised to see it eat a ban, just on the principle that it's just so efficient.
Yeah, I mean, we see Baron not believing in Jets for his own lineup. Doesn't believe in bringing Jets himself. Does he believe in Jets now that he sees this deck staring across from him at the table? Very well might be. But with that being said, let's find out what our players did ban, and after that, quickly get our way into the games. So here are our players' decks, and I can tell you now that the bans coming in from each player is going to be Baron losing the odd German deck. The German-Japan odd aggro is banned from Baron. Of course, he has 2 German decks. The other German deck he will have access to is the even German-Britain sort of mid-range deck. And then from Bubbles' side, his Britain-Italy odd, just play all the guards and healing and AoE's deck is banned. And if I'm Baron, it might not be the most well-constructed deck, or at least the deck that necessarily is targeted into my lineup the most, but it's a deck that I just don't want to play against. Frankly, like I'm fine with matchups like Jet, I'm fine with matchups like Jagro, but maybe I just don't want to play against guard after guard after guard with this more aggressive lineup we see from Baron. In the past, we saw way more stall decks into these late wombo combo decks. Here, Baron is just bringing much more aggressive decks here, and I don't think we're getting the world where Bubbles 4-0s Baron. I don't know who's going to win this, but I think that there is a 0% chance that Bubbles doesn't win Baron doesn't win a single game against Bubbles with this lineup. I'm also now seeing that there is in fact a typo on this screen as well. That will be fixed momentarily, but enough diddle daddling.
Hi, Berto. Yeah. I will say, Baron's ban did surprise me a little, but I see the logic. I think Bubbles' ban was brilliant because of what Bubbles' lineup is. That hyper fast deck just had a chance to go under a couple of his lists too efficiently. Um, but yeah, I'm with you on the I really can't see a sweep here.
Yeah. So, um, if you're Birdo, that does. I mean, the sweep was always unlikely. But if it was going to happen, it would be based on just something disastrous coming out from the deck building stage. And I don't think that is a remotely fair assessment of either of our players' lineups here. Both of them came here to win. This will be a back and forth affair, maybe another game 7. So again, if Baron wins this, he is through. If Innocent Bubbles wins this, he is through. Birdo is watching. He needs Baron to win this series. So let's let the players know that they are ready for game 1, and then we will pull it up. And after every single game, I will be doing a giveaway. So make sure you enter the giveaway with exclamation mark giveaway in Twitch chat, and it will let you know that you are in it. And I have also now updated the screen.
Oh, Bubbles, you're back.
Well, in this case, Bubble.
It'll do. It's better than Berto.
All right, so we're just letting our players get online. So we will actually draw the first entrant here, who is going to be Danny's Direction. So congratulations, Danny's Direction, on winning 150 gold, which I will be sending your way after the stream. And while we wait for the players to get on, you get the question that every caster loves to get: which deck are you going to start with if you are these players in these lineups?
If I'm Baron, I want to play my riskiest deck first. I believe Baron would be the kind of person who will take that Japan-Soviet push and try and get that win on it. And just rip one out quickly so it's out of the way and it gets one of those disgusting early wins. If I'm Bubbles, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him actually open up with the German-US mid-range deck, just because Baron has such a variety of options, but man, could I ever have been more wrong.
We will have Baron on the top of your screen here with the Brit Air, the Brit Soviet Air.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom you have Bubbles with the Japan USA aggro. We saw a similar start from Killswitch, starting with the Jaguar deck. I think that's a pretty reasonable start for these players here. But unlike in our last series, where Killswitch almost got punished for starting with that Jaguar, there was nothing in Baron's lineup that really hard targeted Jaguar. So in this case, he's just going to start with Air, which is most likely Baron's best deck. However, that is not his best hand he could have on this deck.
And no, that's not what you want to see.
Jaguar is definitely a matchup where you want a good hand.
Yeah, I have to say, Bubbles, on the other hand, is looking his hand going, I can live with this.
Yeah, the choice to start with the Shibata, though, it is going to slow him down a little bit. And once Baron just needs to get into a good position by turn 4, turn 5, his hand starts to come alive, and by that point he will also have a series of natural draws that are going to do well. So it's really, he just needs to not be blown off the board in the first 2 to 3 turns of the game, and turn 1 Shibata is not going to accomplish that. Now, Innocent Bubbles has no idea what is in Baron's hand, so from his perspective, he sees the turn 1 pass and just says, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he's setting up a Claim the Skies.
Yeah. Okay, this is not... I would have expected to see the For Freedom played, but I'm not going to lie, I would have actually quite liked to have seen Bicycle Boys with For Freedom to just see if you can find an answer to it. As it is, though, that 2/4 body is a pain to remove, unless, of course, you've got access to a few really bomb cards.
Yeah, all three Type 93s in hand. All three Type 93s this early in the game is one of those things where it's like, this either absolutely wins me the game, because if you can get a little bit of board control, you can just swing face for so much so fast. Or it's
Hmm.
the type of thing where it's like, if you don't get early board control, suddenly your hand is full of these units that don't have blitz and are very easy for the
Yeah.
opponent to remove.
But the thing you don't want to see is a decent body in the front line that can trade out, and then that Type
Oh,
94 coming down. I think you have to answer it and answer it quickly. Thankfully, Baron has some good answers in hand, which of course Bubbles can't know. Those Devil's Brigades are going to need to be deployed very carefully.
yeah, the second Devil's Brigade draw here is actually quite huge. And the Shellin is going to have access next turn. The question here is, do you want to take 3 extra damage from the Jagro, or do you simply just want to lose the Devil's Brigade, trade out the front line?
I think this deck is so fast you have to just trade out. You have a second one in hand. I think you drop the Devil's Brigade and trade out. I really do. But we'll see. I just yeah, I don't think you can afford not to.
Yeah, I think that's the right call
Um,
with Lend-Lease in hand, knowing how much draw you have in your deck.
you need a late game. Uh, I believe chat are saying something about there being spam bots, but I can't currently concentrate on both. Um,
Oh yeah. Um, I will deal with that.
this is an interesting position though, because I'm not the deeper we go after that trade out, as Bubbles, I'm starting to like my Type 93s even less. Um, and pushing up a Type 93, honestly, on Jagro, it never feels great.
Yeah, you saw him looking at that AA gun, deciding against it because it can just simply be removed by the Kitty Hawk on board. But this play is just going to walk straight into the second Devil's Brigade, which, I mean, if you're Bubbles, you don't
Unfortunately.
play around it. He also has the option to just go for the shell and you take the 2 damage on Shibata, but you get in the early credit denial.
Yeah, and I mean, you are a card player, and you know the mathematical odds of having both of those Devil's Brigades in hand this early in the game, and they're not that high. It just sometimes it sucks when this happens, which it's about to. Um, I kind of almost though want to see Devil's Brigade Cass then trade so that that Devil's Brigade's a bigger defensive. That was not what I was expecting. That's a very early shelling. Might turn out to be good, might turn out to not be.
Yeah, with shelling, it's a weird balance because you're having to balance shelling as an AOE and hitting 3 units, only killing 2 of them that you could have otherwise answered in a different way is not, you know, it's not amazing. You can definitely catch more if you greed out, but the other part of shelling is the credit denial. And the earlier
Mm.
you get a credit denial effect off, the more total credits you are removing from your opponent. So generally speaking, if you're given the opportunity to play a credit denial card on curve, and it doesn't immediately lose you the game, my
I mean,
rule
it's
of
never
thumb
bad,
is,
is it?
yeah,
Yeah.
is to go for it. In this case, with the Shibata, you are taking damage, and the Devil's Brigade option last turn was great. It does curve very well into Devil's Brigade here. He now has the front line.
Mm,
Bubbles can take it back with the cavalry draw.
yeah. Bubbles would like to be able to maintain some board presence though, because he'd love to take advantage of that goose. But obviously he doesn't. It's part of the reason that I wasn't necessarily a fan of the shelling, but it is just a me thing. Is while I love it on curve, I like it more for killing down the board before my opponent refills his hand.
Yeah, and the Signal Regiment pickup is pretty big from Bubbles because his hand size is shrinking, and he has the Groom and Goose, but no clear ability to
Mm,
pop off with the Groom and Goose in the following
yeah.
turns. But another expansion pickup is huge to get that
Yeah,
hand
that's
going again.
massive. Yeah,
Another
and
Shibata pickup.
we got a surprise attack, which is nice if you want to just remove some of Baron's options. I love the yep, there it is, the pin on the. I love the pin on the Kitty Hawk here. I think that just gives you time to establish because now you can start really trying to establish some. Oh, now.
Yeah, Claim the Skies doesn't matter that it's pinned. Can still
Yep,
attack.
I was going to say what a number of the broken things about Claim the Skies is that it really doesn't care if your unit's
And
pinned.
that can be used to kill Signal Regiment. That can be used to kill the Type Rank 3. That can be used to kill the Shibata.
I mean,
Either way,
for
you are
me,
taking the 2 damage from the Shibata, though.
you are, but I mean, you've got research in hand, which means that you can get some heal. I would love to see Baron just remove that Signal Regiment right now and say, "Now you're not. That is a toy I am not willing to let you play with." Um, and I think he might, but it's making a big statement, but I think it's a very strong statement, and you do end up with a very, very good. No, he chooses. Okay, so he chooses to remove the Shibata, which is kind of fair, and he can then radar without the loss, which is okay. That expansion is a huge top deck for Bubbles. Naval Supply Run is not massive yet, but it will be. I'd like to see Bubbles. Oh no, actually, I wouldn't because he needs to do something about that Kitty Hawk first. Oh, if he can pin the Kitty Hawk, I'd kind of like to see Bubbles drop that goose now,
Yeah.
because now it doesn't matter that Baron knows what it is.
Oh, another
Not
Claim the Skies.
It's gonna hurt.
There goes Signal Regiment.
I was going to say, I suspect at this point we actually can say goodbye to the Signal Regiment because it'd kind of be rude not to.
And that's actually huge because with the Shiden in hand, and Baron playing his only piece of healing in the Radiant Brigade, because again,
Yeah.
odd deck, no sincerely yours. This the Signal Regiment, if it just dealt a little bit more damage, which it was almost certainly going to, brings Baron down to 8. Baron's hand doesn't look like it could end the game before turn 8 while responding to threats Bubbles can put out. Or sorry, before turn 11. And then on 11, Sheen comes out, does the last 8 damage. But with Signal Regiment dead, Groom and Goose is currently acting like essentially a guaranteed 2 damage face, which drops him to 10. He can't combine that with the Naval Supply Run, though, because there's no way to buff the Groom and Goose without attacking first.
And the value of that cast is not to be underestimated. 6/6 bodies are always a problem. It's not great to see the raiding brigade at the minute. There's no good target for it. So we see Naval Supply Run just to try and enable the trades. Oh, that M10 could be huge.
Yup, and it does draw another card because of the Groom and Goose here. It brings him to 6, which means Shiden, if it's not discarded, 1 and 5, will be lethal if he can make it to turn 11.
Yeah. This is a very strong position for Bubbles. That M10 looms large because it allows him to. He can eat 1 turn from the Kitty Hawk, but then that Kitty Hawk goes back to being the little baby fighter it's meant to be, not the monster that it's become. But yeah, just obviously the Gladiator is a card you kind of want to play, but he does. He has to know Raiding Brigade's a possibility, so you want to be able to get it clear if you possibly can. But I don't think he's got the luxury right now. This could end up feeling very painful for Baron if this sequence goes the way I expect it to. I think we might see a bit of Baron sad face.
Yeah.
Because it's entirely possible that he goes Swordfish, Gladiator, Cass, and then next turn Bubbles just removes everything and says, no.
Well, he does need to attack with the Kitty Hawk this turn to avoid dying just on board.
Yeah.
And we see Shiden in hand, 1 operation cost units. There's a 75% chance Bubbles just wins here.
Yep.
And that's going to be game. Shiden is not discarded, and very similar, actually, to the Birdo Killswitch game, where we saw Killswitch taking game number 1 with an early Signal Regiment burning down to a Shiden, one of the last cards left in hand to take a game 1. Obviously, different matchups, different players, different decks, but either way, it will see Innocent Bubbles taking a early series lead, 1-0 over Baron here. And
it's a good win for Bubbles. That's going to feel good. It always feels good when you open on a win, particularly when you know you want to win this set to give yourself that chance in the final.
It's also just putting the pressure onto Baron. From Baron's perspective, he's thinking, I just need to win a single game and I'm through. I'm going to start with my
Yeah.
best deck. If I win a single game on my best deck, I'm through. And you
Yeah.
lost the first game. And now, granted, that might have been against Bubbles' best deck, or at the very least, the deck that is most guaranteed a win, which I suppose is uh, the best
Effectively the
definition
same
of the
thing.
best
Yeah.
deck. Um, so you know, from just a purely it's not a big deal just on paper that he has won this, but that's not necessarily how the players are going to be feeling about this themselves. From Bubbles' point of view, this is just some good early momentum. And then from Baron's point of view, it's that thought in the back of your mind has now entered of just like, what if I do lose 4-0? And if Bubbles can take a 2-0 series lead, then that thought is just going to only get louder and louder and louder. Now,
It's the
obviously,
thing that gets bigger.
if Baron bounces back and just wins it, ties it up 1-1, that thought is completely gone. And we have a series on our hands where both players are just trying to get the win. But game two, if Bubbles can win game two, that is going to be absolutely massive. But
It
now
would, yeah.
let's do a quick giveaway. So if you haven't joined already, I see there's a lot of people in chat. Not a lot of people have joined. So exclamation mark giveaway in chat. And let's
Do it.
draw
It's
the
gold.
second entrant, and it is Cosmic Galaxy. So Cosmic Galaxy, congratulations on winning 150 gold. Um, and just to be clear, you don't have to be following the channel or anything like that to enter the giveaway. And it's not going to improve your odds, but if you want to follow me on Twitch, you are definitely more than welcome to. And I will get spectator mode set up for game two. But in the meantime, if you're banned, you just run it back on air. Like, presumably he
Yeah,
started on the deck because he feels like it's his best.
yeah, I 100% do. I don't let myself get adjusted out of this. It's my mindset's there, and I know this is my best deck. And I ran into the deck that had a really solid chance against me. It won, but I've got to believe it can get me one more win. And I think if I've opened up that way, I want to see it through. And it's a good deck. Bubbles, on the other hand, it's hard to decide what Bubbles might do here. I'd almost be tempted to just roll out Jet and see if I can take that 2-0 for the psychological advantage. Just see if I can tilt my opponent a little bit and say, niggle right in and be like, no, I'm right here. I'm on your shoulder, and this isn't a given. That is a big risk though, because then you are leaving one of your strongest decks is then gone if you get that win. Conquest being Conquest, but I would not be surprised to see that be the matchup we see, but we shall find out.
All right. The players just had a quick break, so we're about to get into game number two, and let's just pull a third giveaway here. And it is going to be going to Birdo's Kid. So congratulations, Birdo's Kid, on the win. And here we go into game number two.
Okay, so interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be Bubbles on the Soviet Japan even control list versus
Well, yeah.
Baron's German Britain even mid range list. And this is two of the more odd decks. Not necessarily the weakest decks, but just two of their decks that are just sort of average. So definitely the decks that you're putting in at the end of your lineup here, just trying to see what's left or what's really going to work. So this is normally we see these types of matches later in the series. People like to start with their best decks first. But what's good about this is whoever wins this matchup, they're not going to have to worry about that deck eating a couple just free wins for the opponent if they run like their best deck into it, per se. So we're going to see just whose deck is a little bit better here. And from Bubbles' point of view, you have the big units. From Baron's point of view, you have a bit more card draw than your opponent, and you have some very tricky value generation that might not necessarily come in the form of the biggest card on the board, but it's going to come in the form of just being able to apply consistent pressure. But if we look at the hand right now from Innocent Bubbles, that hand is looking very, very good. We're going to almost certainly see the turn 4 Southern plan coming out.
I mean, like you say, credit denial on curve, especially in a situation like this, notwithstanding my comments in the last game, is almost always the thing you want to see. Southern plan is so strong. And slowing Baron down here is huge.
Yeah, the
Aaron does have 40, which is nice to see. Um, it's got the Cromwell kind of sitting, but do you just go countermeasures here and try and get some tempo back by just punishing your opponent's plays?
yeah, it's very difficult here for your Baron, because if you're Baron, you're just trying to hit 6 credits as quickly as possible. You want to get down these FWs, and these FWs
Mm.
are going to be the big sticky units that are difficult for Bubbles to remove, with his deck having very little removal. Um, and you also don't want to commit too many units to the board because of Scorched Earth. The second
Oh
Southern Plant off the
no.
top, this is turn 5, and it's going to keep Baron on 4 credits for even longer. It's going to take him until turn 8 to reach that.
Yeah, I have been on the receiving end of on curve and then follow up Southern Plan myself, and it is horrendous.
And
It's
Bubbles, playing the Brion's Regiment first, plays into Stranglehold. If that had been a Stranglehold rather than the Careless Talk,
yeah.
that would have been a huge turn of events for Baron. So a little bit of a mistake here from Innocent Bubbles, and we're all
Oh,
it.
the spy ring though is that's the if you want to be if Bubbles is in his mode of wanting to just kind of niggle at you psychologically, playing spy ring right now is actually a bit of a flex. And there it goes.
British research, definitely the worst one in this case. There's a world where
Yeah.
he could go for Bletchley Park. Baron's
I
deck
was about to
tops out at
say
6.
yeah, and honestly, with if you've already been credit denialed back as much as Baron has, and even the threat of Bletchley Park looming can make you feel bad.
And even
Um,
pulling out for Sonar at tier 3 research, just absolutely disgusting. If he's able to get
so
that
good.
down and then get those 6 credit cards that Baron is finally has access to 9 credits.
Yeah. I mean, legitimately, I love this play from Bubbles. He's doing exactly what we just talked about. This is that little head game. Like you're just floating that, sitting quite pretty behind your really irritating guards, watching the clock tick towards things that you do not want to see as Baron, and this can be very tilting.
Yeah,
Um, it is not a fun position to be in, and Baron is not looking at a lot of really good solutions in hand.
and we're gonna see, is it Bletchley or is it Sonar? It's gonna be the
He's gone
Sonar.
for Sonar, which is fair. I mean, Bletchley would have been really just going for I suppose the big full court.
And if you're
Kind of
Baron, I think you wanted your opponent to go for the bait of Bletchley, because you have the Monsoon Rot, which is not
yeah.
excellent, but it's not going to be sent back by Bletchley. And then you have the 2 FWs in hand. You can go for the Blitz Doctrine to just get another big non-Bletchleyable tank in your hand as well.
True.
But now,
That
instead, your
said,
hand is just so slow, and your units on
yeah,
board are
my thing is,
so
I mean, right
slow.
now you look down and you see two Folkwaft that are gonna cost you 9. It's so
Yeah,
painful.
it's turn 10, and he still can't play his 6 drops.
Yep. And this Bubbles has literally just shut him down. And that is the power of Southern Plan, and it's why Southern Plan is a truly, truly foul card, in my opinion. It's so strong, and as Baron right now, you have to clear your head because everything in your hand looks so expensive and you've got no acceleration, but you've just got to buy the sword if you ever want to refill your hand. I mean, if Bubbles ever feels the need. I like the pull of the Alf Clarang. I know there are going to
Oh,
be people who oh
and it
no.
hit the drop point as well, which is just a waste, because everything in Bubbles' hand you want to suppress, except
Yeah.
for the salvaged Offclong, which is not going to
Yeah.
do anything. And the Careless Talk, it's not a big deal, but it's a 1 credit countermeasure here that he's floating, that Baron will
Just
definitely be thinking about.
I was going to say, I mean, just because he can. I like the Monsoon Rot. You need to get value out of it as soon as you can because right now you're in a horrible position. But of course, Bubbles can just trade out with a unit that he took from you. Um, that Corson looks very tempting to me right now. Um, Eric, we'll see. Bubbles might disagree with me, but I like the Corson play.
Yeah, I think he's just thinking
Uh,
about where he wants it on the board. You definitely
yeah,
want to try to keep your HQ, if not guarded at all times, the ability to be guarded at all times, just because
yeah.
of the power of
I was going to go
combat.
with the first rifles, which is fair because then he can double up. I mean, first rifles is just another really, really disgusting card.
Yeah,
Um, oh, Cromwell, first rifles, Corson. If you're Baron, you're just looking at this going, well, I've got my work cut out for me.
yeah. Root Out can clean up a decent chunk of these units,
Yep.
and that's what we're going to see. But again, he's he's slowly working his way through these incredibly expensive cards, and he's managed to get off most of the 4 operation cost units. We can't see the operation cost on the units, but the Panzer H is 4 operation cost. The Seaforth is 1
Yep.
operation cost in hand.
Yeah. I like 64 Panzer Grenadier. You'd love to be able to get that out covered by a guard. Because you'd like to get that to pop, but Bubbles is not going to leave you the space. Bubbles can just apply the pressure right now.
Yeah.
Um,
There's the Africa Corps, and that's definitely the card he needed here. Basically needs to pull a Leopold, just reset the board state.
yeah,
The Leopold
Leo
itself.
is you desperately want to see Leo and just be able to slam
Oh,
Leo down
and
next.
there it is. I thought about it for a brief second there. Instant
Yeah,
Leopold pick. And because of the 1 copy of For Glory in hand, for Innocent Bubbles, the Leopold will be immediately answered, and that's not really a given. It definitely not being answered for 2 credits. It's by far Bubbles' best way of answering it, and it's
yeah,
his only copy of For Glory in the deck. So if you're Baron, seeing the Leopold being immediately answered by For Glory is going to be quite tilting.
yeah, just a bit. And Bubbles will enjoy that option. Um, but yeah, I think there's this. It's such a hard road for Baron, even with pulling Leopold.
And you can't even like
It's,
bounce Leopold to your hand for a future turn with the Wait, I'm blanking on the name of the card, but the 2-cost card. Um,
oh
because it's not a 2-cost card anymore. It's a 5-cost card in his hand.
yeah, shifting attack.
Yeah,
Yeah, if shifting attack was still 2 cost, you would 100% do it.
and
As it is, I mean, you kind of don't have a
oh,
choice.
if you're Baron, you're seeing the T-34 getting milled, and you're just thinking, yes, he can't answer the Leo now. This is my way back into the game. Just absolutely
And
farming
then
my
for
button with
glory
Leo,
just goes
and then
bye.
2 credits. And at this point, you just start. It's not necessarily the most credit efficient thing you can be doing, but just this slamming the cavalry regiments. There's 3 of them in the deck, and they're just so difficult to deal with because Baron doesn't have any way to suppress units anymore. It was really that one
No.
hit the drop point, and it's been used.
Judson feels so bad right now because Bubbles is probably not going to give you any good targets. I think he has to drop one of the expensive FWs, and he does, just to try and draw. I mean, kind of got to risk it to find out. Oh, that's
The
gonna
second Winter
no,
Regiment draw.
If I'm Bubbles, I windmills. Yeah, there we go. I just windmill slam this down because it will tilt the life out of you because you're like, oh look, I just top deck the answer to your only acceleration.
It's moments like these where I wish that we had player cams on, because
Oh yeah,
just the
the faces.
juxtaposition I'm sure that is going on right now. And
Mm.
I know Bubbles, he loves to perform for the camera. I'm sure he would just be like literally falling out of his chair laughing at the moment.
I can literally see Bubbles doing Doctor Evil while making these plays. I like to believe that is what he's legitimately doing, even privately to himself, because that play of that Winter Regiment so quickly and being totally okay with it, like, I want you to know that I top decked that. I really do, because that feels so bad.
the foiled plans there, definitely not the card
No.
Baron was wanting to see off here. Maybe From the
Oh,
Deep or
that's
Night
so
Hunters.
sad. You're having to sudden strike your own credit generation engine.
Yep. And just everything's guarded. He can't even kill the Winter Regiment.
Nope.
And if
Bubbles
he
is
can kill a
just sitting there.
Takasagi, but that is just gonna discard one of your cards. You hope it's the evasive action that's just stuck in your hand.
Yeah,
Evasive action? It can actually hit the 36th Cavalry. The 36th
yeah.
Cavalry is
Well, I mean, you've got to do something with the Blitz Doctrine. Oh, another cav though. I mean, Bubbles could have a big flex turn. I really like just putting one of these 36 cavalry down and pushing it forward. Um, oh, or
Okay.
all right, fair. Yeah, let's just discard some of your cards.
Yeah,
Fine.
not the best card in his hand, but definitely not the worst card in your hand.
No.
Uh,
And now, yeah, he slaps down the 6/6 body, and it's just if you're Baron right now, you're looking at this thinking, how can this possibly get any worse?
yeah, he can trade out Corson. It will cost him 3 credits to trade out Corson, which means he can't double Schützen into the Winter Regiment.
Uh, which is the
Um,
thing, because you really want to be able to answer Winter Regiment as soon as is humanly possible, because we all know how annoying Winter Regiment is. Um, and we did talk about it, and I know we've not seen the emote spams, but Bubbles has definitely been using his play sequences to have that little bit of just reminding you how badly the cards are treating you.
yeah, and this was always going to be a rough matchup, but this is absolutely brutal. We see the Schützen just being sacrificed into the Corson. Contest Doctrine
That's
Blast.
such a horrible turn to have to play out. You're losing so much value, but
Oh, he picks up the Zug, and the Zug is going to be able to
yeah, I was going to say
trade
Zug
out.
is actually not terrible right now.
Unfortunately, he does not have a second Leopold or a way of
Yeah, I was
generating a
going to say
second Leopold.
Zug looks a lot less good now as Bubbles pushes forward yet another guarded 6/6 that will create 3/3s.
Yeah, he can
Um,
C4th to defend, but he can't really do a whole lot of anything about that. Evasive action will stop the Sendai Regiment. This is a very good read.
yeah, from the deep for the destruction. There are he could blow up some fun stuff here, but oh look, let's just
Oh,
can you imagine if Bubbles plays? Oh no, he doesn't. I was gonna say, can you imagine if he played it and it just explodes into an IS-2?
the 3 credit evasive action coming out stops the
Yep.
Sendai, and
Which is good because that Sendai would be devastating.
this
But
is this
oh
isn't even deck, and we saw the one Monsoon Rot coming out earlier, and it did accomplish something. Um, Unfortunately, I really just have to think, could that Monsoon Rot have been better served if instead it was something like a Maelstrom, for example? Because a Maelstrom in
yeah,
this situation would actually accomplish something. He'd still probably lose the game.
yeah,
Certainly
but
lose
it
the
would
game,
have.
but
Uh,
it was no lethal. He can Spy Ring, and
I
if
was
he
gonna
hits
say,
British Research, he
yeah,
wins.
I got. I mean, to be fair, there is a degree to which if I'm Bubbles, I seriously consider just V1 flying. Oh no, you can't, it's not a good target because that would be another
Oh.
moment of it. Big pop for the draw and just wait it out because you're basically saying you need to find the world's biggest guard or you lose.
And the Winter Offensive pickup off the Buy the Sword means that this is guaranteed lethal. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no card in Baron's deck that will stop him from dying to board this turn. But even if he didn't,
no, Bubbles can still win it from hand. Now, what is interesting is if you're Bubbles and you really want to rub, if I'm Bubbles and I really want to rub salt in the wound, next turn I just windmill slam Winter Offensive because it just makes you feel bad.
yep, the good game friend coming out here. And even that on its own is, if you're
Yeah,
Baron,
Baron's not waiting around to let anything else happen. He's like, all right, fine, point made, we're done.
and that's the 2-0. The 2-0 lead coming out from Bubbles, and winning with that Soviet deck was definitely the probably the hardest deck he had left to win with in his lineup. And if Baron just sort of
Getting that win out of the way now has got to feel good if you're Bubbles because you're like, now I don't have to win with that later. And I wasn't looking forward to it.
if you're Birdo now, at first you see Baron lose the first game, and you're thinking, oh no, I need Baron to win. And now you see Baron lose the second game, and you're starting to think, wait, maybe.
Now do I start cheering for Bubbles?
Yeah, at what
Do I
point
just
does
want
his allegiances change?
do I just want Bubbles to make both J King and Bear look ridiculously dumb for saying there is just no way that Bubbles sweeps this?
And again, we have never seen a 3-0 or even a 3-1 lead for any player It's always been
It's
tied
always gone
2-2
2-2. Yeah,
every single
every
time.
single time.
But
Crazy.
we'd always seen it go to game 7 up until yesterday, and yesterday we saw our first game 6. So could we be on our way to seeing our first game 4? That would be absolutely insane. That would just be devastating. And if you're Baron, I think you need to switch back to air. Just say, I need a
Yeah, no,
single win.
I agree with you 100%. I think Baron just has to pick up the air deck, go, look, I have to get a win. I have to get a win because this is starting to get away, and it will start to affect you again mentally. The mental game is huge here. You do not want that kind of just that horrible, horrible sword hanging over you constantly. You want to get rid of that as soon as is humanly possible right now because this is the moment where it starts to feel really real that you might actually get swept.
And if we just think about that last matchup, air probably wins that matchup 99% of the time, even with just the southern plan into the southern plan into the Brit research going down. Air just doesn't care. You have
odds are you still win.
Yeah, and that was always a matchup that Baron just had in his back pocket. If Bubbles wins on his 2 German decks and is left with just the Soviet control, Baron can always just say, you know what, I have a free win to still get here. But that Soviet deck's gone, and now you're up against German-US odd and German-US even, and you're starting to question yourself on, are Jets really that bad? I didn't bring Jets. Maybe I should have brought Jets.
I mean, the other thing that may be in your head right now, as much as that Italy control deck looked horrible and you didn't want to play into it, right now, in the position I'm in, I am having a moment where I'm like, I kind of wish I had banned Jet,
Yeah, you're
because
definitely...
Bubbles could just slam Jet down on the table next game and go, all right, it's go time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Bubbles at this point, which of the 2 decks do you think you bring? I mean, it doesn't... They're both very similar in a lot of ways. Do you just keep Jet for last? Because
I think it depends on how you feel. I think if you want to play the mind game the heavy way, you pick Jet now. Because what you're saying is, I am going to blitz you with Jet, and then I'm going to look at you across the table for the rest of this set going, I only have to win 1 game on a pretty decent mid-range deck.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you want to be a little bit more conservative and just look after your own positioning, there is a part of you that is like that mid-range deck does have that consistency, and then you've got the big bullet for later. But I honestly, I won't lie, I love mind games. I love getting into my opponent's head. And I would love to see Bubbles just drop the Jet prototype deck and really put the pressure on.
There is a lot of thought that also goes into it, because the Jet deck is probably quite good into air. It has the Pack 40s, it has the 7 strikes, and then it just has their stores, FWs, block the bombers.
And you know that Baron's going to want to go back to air because it's his strongest deck and he needs that win. And if you can cripple him on his best deck a second time...
Yeah, if we see a Baron switch back to air and then just get stomped by Jet and go down 3-0, losing twice on air, I think at that point Baron might just, switch to something else. Like, Baron at that point might just be mentally defeated. He's just going to be like, okay, I need to, I'm just going to switch to Japan. And, it's those types of decisions that can lead to a sweep. So this is...
again, these are the moments where, like I was talking about, the slight difference in psychology with how chill Bubbles can remain, no matter how aggro-y stuff gets around him, does play a big part in that. Bubbles right now he's pretty chill. I guarantee you. He doesn't feel badly about any of his choices. It's just, how much do I want to feel like it's my old rugby player? It's like, if you land that good tackle, how much do you want that little whisper in the ear as you're standing up to just make the point?
Yeah. And we were talking down a lot on Baron. Baron did go down 2-0 against Killswitch, and then he turned things around and still won that series 4-3. Baron has been down before. It's really going to come down to this next game, because if Baron loses this next game, it is looking rough. It is looking absolutely devastating. If Baron just wins this game, we have an absolute series on our hands. It's gone back and forth. Baron's gotten his ticket stamped to the finals. And, this entire narrative we're talking about disappears into thin air. But he needs to win a game to do that. And it's not been looking good so far.
Yeah, I'm not. I will never count Baron out. He's a good friend of mine. They're both friends of mine. I love both of these people. It's really hard to. I have no real bias as to who I want to win. I will say I kind of would like to see Baron get the win here. I love you, Bubbles, but I don't want Baron to go through the psychological hell that would come from this third loss because that it's not a fun place to be.
Yeah, and as exciting as this is, we have to remember our players are sitting here waiting.
Yeah,
They're waiting for that
I know.
confirmation that go for game three, and we are already making it worse on Baron.
I
If
know.
you're Bubbles, you're
Like,
probably chilling. You're
yeah.
you're up 2-0.
But
You're
Baron
feeling
is
good.
probably right now reaching for the DMs to go, look, guys, I love you, but.
Yeah. So before we jump into the next game, we will draw one giveaway, and it's going to be Dan Civilap. So Dan Civilap, congratulations, you have won again 150 gold. Thank you very much for watching the stream, and let's let the players know we are ready for them to head into game three. And I'm very interested on Baron's deck choice here.
You and me both. It's going to speak a lot to where he feels he is mentally as to what he's chosen to do right now.
I think if we see Germany or Japan come out, I think that points to Baron being somewhat mentally shattered.
Yeah.
Whereas if we see just simply this, if we see air, if we see the, oh, getting a bit of lag on the spectator one. There we go.
Bubbles did exactly what I expected him to do.
And Baron is running it back on Joe Britt.
Oh, yep. Okay.
And of course, OBS, we can't have nice things, has decided to switch these sources around.
Yeah, of course, because it loves us so very much. Bubbles already dropping the early War Machine.
And this, I mean, Baron's deck has guards. And the evasive action in hand is going to be really, really good if well timed into the Jet prototype.
Yeah.
But
I
also,
like Blitz Doctrine. Yeah, Blitz Doctrine is probably his best bet right now is to try and get set to get this late game. Although that's really this is the harder pick because like the 35T seems obvious, but he's taking it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's taken another 2 damage from
Yeah.
the Whirlwind here. When I see the Pack 40 come out, just as a tempo
Yeah.
play.
I like this more actually.
Yeah, it goes for the health.
Yeah, he's setting himself up to get built into a really strong jet turn, and of course Bubbles knows he's got Firebomb in hand.
And I'm very curious to see, does Baron hold evasive action this turn, knowing it's going into his opponent's turn 6? And if so, is Bubbles going to just slam Jet on 6? Well, on 5. Or is he going to think about it, knowing evasive action is in the lineup, and maybe go for the FW? And
yeah,
I think he goes for the FW, because Jet doesn't look that good onto this board. It just
no, I think
hits the guard.
I think unfortunately, yeah, he's not going to get baited into this because FW just feels like the better player
or just
right now.
firebomb the guard, push up the 2/5, and swing face for another 2 damage.
Yeah, because that's direct damage that perfectly removes that guard.
That's a decent draw. He can take out the Volks Grenadier.
Yep.
He does need to 35T first if he wants to go for this line.
Yeah, he does.
I guess he could just float the credit, have 35T in hand. I'd rather have the 2-1 on the board, though.
I was going to say, I'm not sure what that gains you. Yeah, I think this is the, yeah. I think this is, okay.
Yep.
It's, he's got the 4-2 on board, and Bubble still has to figure out how he wants to deal. He knows the countermeasures in there.
The Sky Baron's pickup from Baron is also quite big.
Yeah, that could be a huge play.
Jet or FW, either one is going to be answered. Jet being played, it's going to get the evasive action, stops it from attacking that turn. But it's actually kind of awkward because Baron is still... Okay, the C4th Highlanders draw is actually quite massive here. He can trade off Whirlwind. He doesn't need to Sky Barons this turn. He can save it for FW. He's thinking about it, though. He's thinking about just getting it off the board, leaving the board state empty.
I
He
don't know if I like this.
I guess the worry is Duress, because Bubbles runs two
Yeah,
copies of Duress, and you're worried that you play C4th and your opponent simply just Duresses and
yeah.
swings face for the 5, even at paying 5 credits to do so. Because Baron's deck runs no healing.
No. There are a lot of things that Bubbles could do right now.
I mean, you've seen the one copy of Sky Barons come out, and you know your opponent
Yeah,
has 3 more copies of Guards in the deck. I think you have to play FW, and he does it. It's the responsible choice, and it picks
yeah.
up the second Jet prototype, which would have been destroyed by the first one had the evasive action not procced.
Yeah. Um,
And Baron is essentially one top deck to Duress away from going down 3-0.
Yup.
He gets the Heinkel, he goes for the attack, it spoils war in hand to make it easier. And top deck Duress, it's not lethal this turn, but how?
This is gonna feel so bad. How do you find a way back?
See it top deck, you know your opponent top decked Duress and drew the second jet off the FW last turn.
Oh, that's gonna hurt.
You have to spoils for a guard. There's nothing else.
Yep. You have no choice. There is no other option. If you don't pull a guard, you are basically
And
done.
even if he hits the guard, he's dead to Comet from hand.
Yeah.
So this is it. This is Baron going down 3-0.
3-0. There's no way out of it. Oh, that's gonna hurt.
And
okay,
we are seeing new things in the King's Cup here. This
is not what I would have predicted in a million years.
And it's all going to come down to German-Japan aggro. Again,
Yep.
Bubbles just needs to win this. Bubbles at this point, Bubbles is thinking, I'm basically guaranteed. Unless I get reverse sweeped, I'm in the finals. Bubbles doesn't necessarily care who his opponent is in the finals, and he's not fighting for any bonuses or not. But if you're Baron, you won the first 2 matches, but suddenly everything is slipping away before your eyes. And what do you do? What deck do you bring? Does he just...
I mean, you have to. You've got to compose yourself before you even make the choice. Legitimately, you might even ask, "Can I take a few minutes break?" And that would be a legitimate ask, because right now this is one of the most important choices you're going to make in this entire competition.
And if this is for just a regular tournament, you say, you know what, I'm gonna start with like my weakest deck because I have to win with all decks to win this match. But he doesn't need to win this match. He just needs to win a single game, and he is into the finals. And now you just have to look at your 4 decks. You know exactly what your opponent is bringing into the next match. You know every single card in the deck, and you get your pick of 4 decks to go up against it for your best shot of winning.
Yep. But you do know that you have to beat that same deck 4 times if you want this win. Which, by the way, would be an epic thing to watch.
And we've seen some decks brought to this tournament at different various stages from various players that definitely had the look of a deck that could be swept. Certain decks, if you go for certain extremes, if you go very, very all in on a high roll, or you go very, very heavy trying to counter certain decks, that is opening you up to potentially being swept if your opponent just has 4 decks of the opposite strategy. But German-Japan, German-US, just Heinz, odd aggro, is a deck that just is capable of winning against anything. It's a deck that can just hit a good opener with Fast Times and Greif and just win on like turn 5.
I mean, this is legitimately the thing where I loved, as I said, Bubbles' choice to actually go hard on the game and just bring out Jet, because Bubbles then knows he can sit on one of the most versatile decks he is ever going to play, needing to win 1 game in 4, while Baron has to beat him 4 straight times with 4 different decks.
Yeah, and now if you're Birdo, you have given up on Baron winning this set, I think.
Yeah,
you are
right
all
now,
in on
Verto
the innocent
is,
Bubbles.
Yeah, Verto right now is rolling out the Union flags, getting some bunting, drinking a cup of tea, possibly even playing the national anthem, because right now he is just all in on Bubbles.
And we have talked a lot about the importance of Game 4s. You know what I'm going to be saying here.
Yeah.
this is the most important game 4 of this entire tournament so far. And it's funny because normally it's you see somebody up 2-1 and it's a question of do they go up 3-1 or do they tie the series 2-2. This is the first time we've seen it. Is it 3-1 or a sweep? And normally this is sort of the game
Sorry, I'm
fours that
broken
matter
because
the
I've just
least.
watched Berto put "God Save the King" in chat.
Bono here watching intently, seeing if he will be going to the finals. It will all entirely rest on this next game. Unless, of course, Baron can reverse sweep. That is
Yeah.
also a possibility.
I mean, whatever happens in the next few games, it's guaranteed to be epic.
And this is just an absolutely important. Normally, someone up 3-0, this is sort of the least important game 4 because reverse sweeps are incredibly rare in best of sevens, so rare that they essentially don't matter. So if somebody goes up 3-0, normally you write off the series and say that the game 4 doesn't matter a lot because do they win in 4 games, do they win in 5 games, do they win in 6 games, doesn't really matter. But this one, it is essentially the equivalent of a game 7 for Baron's hopes and dreams of getting into this tournament, because if he wins this, he's through. If he loses this, he's out. It's essentially a game 7 for Baron right now. And it's also just the game 4 of the best of 7 that will still continue if Baron wins this game. Absolute roller coaster of a match. And before we get into it, let's do a 300 gold giveaway because
Yeah.
my goodness, this is crazy. So the 300 gold giveaway will be going to Gronkamaj. Apologies if that's not how you say your name, but congratulations on winning 300 gold. And we will also do another 150 gold giveaway, which will be going to Outrider. So congratulations, Outrider, on 150 gold. Let's let the players know that we are ready for Game 4. And Bear.
I'm not sure I'm actually ready for Game 4, but we have to do this. I don't know how composed I can remain right now.
Bear, I have to put it to you. Do you think this is the sweep?
I love Baron to pieces, but Bubbles has done. He's not put a foot wrong. He's my fellow countryman. I'm gonna back him. I'm gonna back him to do it. I would love to see Baron reverse sweep this just for the epicness, but I've got to believe Bubbles is gonna pick up a win. I don't know whether he'll sweep it, but we shall see.
It is going to be Air versus Hines, and we see 2 1-drops at a Monty. From Baron's perspective, from Bubbles' perspective, 2 1-drops, research, 3 1-drops, research, and fast Hines.
Yeah.
Pushing the scout car. The idea being if the scout car is able to be killed, which Claim the Skies will allow it to be killed, it is going to buff up the Panzer A. And Baron's deck struggles for single target removal, so if he just plays Hines on a single card, just makes a big tank, makes a 4/5 tank in the front line on turn 2, that is something that can just absolutely control Baron, because of the odd deck, there's no access to Arados, Albacores, that might just slow this type of card down, and he's not choosing to run the number 9 commandos that Air sometimes runs, no Paracies.
Yeah, he doesn't have that quick removal.
And from Baron's perspective, like, you just sort of have to go for this line, because the other line is just hit it once and play the Gladiator. And that will still lead to you losing the Swordfish. The Swordfish is dead regardless.
Yeah.
And if a Greif is drawn here, it's essentially just over.
Yeah. Hines right now is bad enough.
No Greif, but we do see the turn 3 tank Yeti.
Yeah.
And just MI5. I mean, Bubbles' hand is so tiny. And Bubbles does not run Blitzkriegs, which is an important thing where it will be a bit of a struggle to get across the finish line, but 6 damage coming in on turn 4, and Baron, HMS Illustrious, good draw, and of course Monty can always come down to pin up the board.
I mean, you've got to pick your timing with Monty, and Baron is definitely a good enough player to know how to do that. Radar's great. He's got his Wellington down to 0, which is also always nice to see.
Yep, 0k Wellington. That is going to allow him to remove this tank on the next turn. The question is, does he play a 1-drop to try to bait in a hit, or does he play Monty to just absolutely stall out the board, take no damage this turn?
I honestly like just that sort. I honestly like dropping the swordfish because it, it gives you that chance that you might save yourself that 5 HQ defense, and that could be
Yeah.
everything.
And you know there's no Blitzkrieg. If there was Blitzkrieg, there's the fear of just literally dying this turn. Um,
Yeah.
but no Blitzkriegs in Bubbles' deck. Worst case scenario would be the Panzergren for the +2 attack. Um,
Yeah.
and Bubbles is just saying, you know what? I don't need to trade. I'm gonna just go face. If I don't win with this big unit, I will win with just top deck.
Yeah. I mean, the killer here is also Bubbles doesn't. He's like, I don't have to win this game. He can afford to be quite cavalier.
Exactly. He can take a certain degree of risk. HMS Illustrious is going to come out here rather than the Wellington. I like this. Get rid of the KFC.
Yep.
Don't let a double buff on a Blitz tank swing face.
I think it's a very smart play. The Wellington you can drop later. You've got the pin.
And from Bubbles' turn, unless there's a very big top deck that changes things, I think we're just going to see the Jaeger Regiment on one of these Swordfish and research to kill it, get the draw.
Yeah. It's the only line he's got unless he top decks something that changes the face of this.
And double Jaeger Regiment is going to allow him to draw twice.
Yep.
And this is quite big. Just getting units on the board. Miter pickup.
Marder.
That can theoretically get him back into the game, but this is gonna be quite big. Another cast means that there will be one unit left in the front line, unless I claim this guy's is top decked. But again, no Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, you don't. That is something to be. I mean, you say no Blitzkrieg, but he is holding 33 Panzergren.
That is a very good point, and there's a wealth of Blitz tanks in the deck.
Yeah. Like, obviously, it's not perfect now, but from the point of view of Baron, you've just got to play this the best way you know how. And he has. Oh no!
Panzer, the 20th Panzer Grenadier top deck, by far the best card in Baron's or in Bubbles' deck that he can pick up here, and a Bloody Sickle, in Baron's hand. That's probably a card you're not feeling comfortable playing this game.
No. It's. Yeah, sorry, chat. It's. I know the scores are. It can get flipped up and down, but they are correct at the minute. But yeah. Oh. This. It's not the best feeling, but Baron's. I like that he was willing to do that. I think he kind of had to play the sickle because he's got to clear the board.
Yeah. And this lets him get the unit to the front line. He's sacrificing 1 health to get a unit to the front line.
But that's critical because he's got to be able to, because otherwise this just goes from bad to truly, truly appalling. The Marder is just going to kind of... Bubbles is emptying his hand here. He's like, yeah, okay, so let's see. Either you answer me or you don't. Bubbles is okay living in Top Deck City right now.
Yeah, at this point, it's kind of... The Engineer Battalion coming out from Baron will allow him to take out Marder without drawing a card.
Yeah. Hopefully get some water in there.
Yeah, muting my mic was not working previously, but I've just muted it on OBS to get around the coughs. This is, I mean, you want to say it's as good as over in favor of Baron, but you never quite know. There's no enigmas,
No.
there's no comets, but so it's quite difficult to string together two consecutive draws. There's also no Panzer H's or Blitz Doctrines.
Yeah.
So he's just gonna
So
stuff to the front line, decides to keep back Jaeger, favoring keeping it
yeah.
for the draw potential, which I quite like.
Yeah. There's no reason to throw it out needlessly here. You know that you're about to kind of, you know your board's going to get eaten. There's not a lot you can do about that. Baron, on the other hand, is thinking very carefully about how he wants to use what he has available. Because Baron cannot afford to make a mistake. Because no matter how much it feels like you're in a good position, you still have 8 HQ defense against a deck that runs plenty of blitz. Yeah. Nah, Bubbles is yeah. Oh.
Whoop, I was muted. So we have Baron taking the victory here with a very big win here in game number 4. Just not getting swept, and that is Baron Von Glower guaranteed into the finals of the King's Cup 2 tournament, getting a win finally with his air
Yeah.
deck. And now,
And now the question is, who does he play? Is it Bubbles? Is it Berto?
yeah, at this point, it's oftentimes in tournaments when you have somebody who's already guaranteed, there's sort of questions arise of like, or who do they want to see in the finals? Like, are they going to really play their hardest if they sort of get to play the kingmaker role? If you're Baron right now, you've been getting thrashed by Bubbles. You do not want to see Bubbles in the finals if this is how your set against him goes. You beat Birdo. You would be happy to rematch Birdo in the finals. You do not want this again. So Baron is definitely going to be trying his hardest to still win this set. But again, 3 shots at beating this German deck, and one of them is with the Japan-Soviet deck that can't take 8 damage.
It's true, but then the flip side of it, as I will also say, Baron also has, if he can pull the reverse sweep, the impact of then getting this reverse sweep and getting a free win effectively to start out the best of 9, that's not small either.
Yeah, absolutely. It
But
really is. And we've been talking a lot about what sort of who Berto Burrito is cheering for. Obviously, Berto Burrito certainly currently sitting in third, waiting to see if he will be playing in the finals. Now he needs to switch allegiances once more and go back to cheering on Baron for that reverse sweep, which again it seems very unlikely. But we said somebody going 3 games up was very unlikely. At this point, we saw Bubbles win 3 in a row. Can Baron win 3 in a row from this point?
this point in this tournament, with everything that's going on with these players, I am pitching my psychic cap. I have literally no idea. This is insane in the best possible way. I mean, if you want drama in competitive card gaming, this is where you get it. You couldn't write this.
And
I just
let's do another giveaway and then jump into game number 5 here. So the giveaway will be going to Enrico75 Slayer. So congratulations on Enrico. And again, exclamation mark giveaway to enter the giveaway if you guys haven't already, because we will be doing some more 300 gold giveaways once we get towards the conclusion of this series, which might be as soon as this game, because every single game from now on could be the last one.
Yeah, it could literally just be any game at this point that we are wrapping. This is huge. I'm so interested to see which deck Baron. By the way, I get to do it to you here. If you're Baron, which deck do you pick?
If I'm Baron, I think I would really want to see the US deck come out. I think the US deck has quite a bit with the War Machines, Winter Regiments.
Yeah,
It has a little bit of healing.
and you do.
Yep, there we go. The players this time in the correct positions that they should be. Bubbles on the
Yep.
bottom, Baron on the top. He does not find a War Machine. And from Bubbles' side, you're just probably going to full send this hand. Fast Sides is good if you can get back some Panzer 2As, some
But
Greifs.
do you really need to gamble on it with what I honestly I would just pitch all five, but that's just me. Like Fast Times is great, but only if I hit the thing I want off this. And he's going to keep it. Red Devils is nice to see.
Yeah,
Two Red Devils is
he's content with his hand, but he is punished for keeping that. Baron
Fines, yeah.
still not finding the War Machine. The Aichi coming out, though, it's going to be good, but not great against Red Devils. And the Combat Engineer's top deck is going to make these very difficult to deal with.
Yeah. And we see the emote spam beginning.
Yeah, the amount of stress that is taken off of Baron's shoulders. Like, at this point, if you're Baron, you're thinking, like, oh man, what is going on, man? Like, this guy with the double Red Devils, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But everything is just a little bit less serious, or significantly less serious, I should say.
Serious, yeah.
Because at this point, he's like, I'm through to the next round. Whatever.
Like now I can just play and enjoy playing, and either I pull off something truly magnificent and go against every possible odds, or I was never likely to do so in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. We see the half-track bouncing the Aichi. I would like to see the Panzer 2A come out to set up
You
the
and me
Panzer Gren
both.
on the
I
following
would
turn.
Yeah, it just puts that little bit. It's got smoke screen. It's not going anywhere, and I mean, obviously there are orders, but realistically, I think it's better than just pinking the 2 damage for me. Especially given that it can then pick up the combat engineers buff.
We see another emote coming out. Baron. We're waiting to see what his opponent is going to do. And Bubbles chooses to drop the combat engineers. This is a very interesting choice. It is going to allow the Panzer A to attack for 3 on the following turn, half-track for 4 if it sticks around. However, we see the strategic bombing in the hand of Baron. If these combat engineers don't get pushed next turn, and again, there's no blitzkrieg, so even pushing them doesn't feel fantastic. He's thinking about the scout car, moving up the scout car, sacking it, and he might. I think he's now realized, like, oh wait, strategic bombing is a thing. He chooses to trade out. I'm not sure he thought through that entire turn from the beginning. Once he started playing cards, maybe he thought about strat bombing partway through. But...
Yeah, I sensed there was a mid-turn replan. I don't know. We can't possibly read Bubble's mind, but yeah.
Patrol will actually stop the destruction effect from the scout car here, stopping it from buffing the combat engineers. And that is going to allow the 0 operation cost 5th Rangers take out the 4-2 half-track.
Yeah.
And then 4 credits left over to most likely play a 61st. There's also the possibility of just firebombing this turn. Goes for...
a completely different sequence that I certainly didn't see coming.
Yeah, he patrols the combat engineers that would have been buffed, rather than on the scout car itself, but this way he drops the 2-3 that gives him 2 extra health, and also just removes the combat engineers. I guess he's worried about just the amount of attack buff that these combat engineers are threatening to give. If Innocent Bubbles' hand is several blitz tanks on a follow-up. But here we see 61st Aichi retouching the board. Panzer 2A top deck is good. He would kill for a Duras in this hand at the moment, but...
Duras would make you very happy right now.
He can get the value trade on the 61st, but I suspect that we will see a firebomb coming out. Or actually, probably the strategic bombing and then taking it out. He pushes rather than trades.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. It does make the strategic bombing less tempting.
I mean, I think we you have to firebomb the 7-5, right? You can't let that 7-5 stick
how can
around.
you not? I mean, you have no other answer, and it has to go, because you can't just let it sit there and trade. because he's gonna pop anyway, and then you're gonna get 7 damage to HQ, and I'd rather eat 5 than, well, I mean, you'd rather eat 5 than 12 any day of the week. Let's be honest.
Uh,
Um, I like that. It's good. Yes, all right, fine. He can trade out. He can push up a bit, but Bubbles' hand is getting very light.
yeah.
Well, he's got the embargo that he wanted to see do something cool.
And it's gonna need to do something cool based on this current hand situation. Can you afford to play it here? I think you have to just toss the 5th Rangers into the 5-1.
I don't think you got a choice. That trade, I think, just has to happen because you need to thin down what's coming against you, and I think everything else then has to come after that. I don't know how you don't make that trade.
I guess there's a world where you just say, you know what, my opponent, he's played a lot of blitz cards, he doesn't have any more, he doesn't have any buff cards. I'm just gonna take the value trade so that I can maybe take the front line on the following turn and just play like my opponent has nothing.
Yeah.
Because we're reaching the point where he might have to play to win, not just play to not lose.
Yeah.
Hits the Panzer 4. That's definitely not the trade I thought was going to happen. Does Bubbles? Surely Bubbles does not go for the value trade here. He does not. He goes face,
No.
drops his opponent to 5. Baron has to find an answer.
Yep. There's nothing else he can
A
do.
Winter Regiment top deck here would be absolutely massive.
Yeah, it wouldn't be small, would it? There are cards that can answer in his deck.
Dragon Slayer is not good enough, so he has to strap bomb and trade out the 5-1, only play to stay
Yep.
alive.
Yeah, because then it's top deck city for Bubbles. Is he gonna pop the embargo?
The embargo, it keeps him alive.
Yep.
It's actually quite funny.
I don't not like it. He wanted to see it do a thing.
Oh, but the attack from the combat engineers,
Yeah.
it is going to kill him.
Oh.
And that is going to be a 4-1 victory for Innocent Bubbles. He couldn't make it in 4. He couldn't get the sweep, but that is going to mean that these two players will be going against each other again in the finals. Birdo Burrito is eliminated. I will quickly update the scoreboard, but what a match, and what a finals we have for ourselves. These two players, Baron dominating everybody up until the end, but his opponent in the finals will be the one player who, it can be frankly said, dominated Baron.
Yeah, this is gonna be these guys get to run it back, and they get to run it back over a no advantage, full fat best of 9. That is an endurance event. Also, it's an endurance event for casters, depending on how you're doing it. But it's no legitimately. I'm so excited for that best of 9. These two guys going back at it again is going to be so dramatic. Baron's got that one kind of the chip hanging on his shoulder from this one loss, and he's got to go and take him on again. Bubbles did everything that he needed to do to pull himself back into it. I feel for Berto. There was a moment there where Berto was feeling like, oh wow, and then there was a moment where Berto was feeling, okay, wow, the other way. But this was epic. This was genuinely insane. I mean, this is high quality play, and the fact that Bubbles was able to take a 4-1 is a mighty achievement.
And here we have our final results on the score table, and it is Innocent Bubbles absolutely flipping things on their head, taking a +4 from this match with a 3-game difference and then an additional +1 for winning the match, putting him in the seed 1 position. It's not going to give him any benefits. He did drop a game to kill switch, so it's not going to get any benefit in the finals. It's just going to be a fair best of 9 in the finals. And then you see Baron actually on the same score as Birdo Burrito, but the first tiebreaker is head to head. And when they fought head to head, it was Baron coming out over Birdo, which is why Baron has the winning tiebreaker here. And then you still have, of course, Birdo and Killswitch. Big round of applause for them for participating in this event, bringing decks all 3 weeks, playing their heart out, and just not quite able to make it here. And I mean, wow, what else do you have to say about these 4 players? What the match we saw today, and sort of the event as a whole? Because we still have the big finals. The event is definitely not over. We have more giveaway codes to give out, and I will be getting those. I will be giving out some more codes in a minute, so don't leave just yet. But I mean, we're done the group stage. We're done the round robin. I mean, yeah. What do you think are the takeaways that this scoreboard are telling us here?
I think the big takeaway, I mean, aside from, first of all, the amount of respect due to all 4 of these players for the quality of their play and their commitment to this, you guys are amazing. I love you to pieces. The big takeaway from me is that how much this format makes discipline and overall skill pay. You would not. There was a point at which this looked very different. This is flipped on its head, and you've got an incredibly close. Like everyone, no one here is like sitting here going, "I just got obliterated in this." Everyone's got at least 1 match win. We've got 2 players on 2 match wins who are going into a best of 9 final. It was down to the wire. Bubbles had to do something that honestly you wouldn't have bet money on him being able to do. I mean, some of you might have, but you'd be mad. I thought it was brilliant. The level, the quality of play is hard to properly articulate because this is not an easy format to play in. Your brain has been challenged with deck building to the point whereby, honestly, a straight 5 decks, no bans, best of 9 in just the game as is might actually be a relief. From a deck building point of view. But I mean, this has just been incredible. This has been a privilege to cast. It's been a privilege to watch, and it's definitely not over. The final is going to be epic, however it goes. But this format has just ramped from the first set onwards.
Yeah,
It's just crazy.
I'm currently getting the I'm setting up a screen to show you guys the format for the finals because of course every week had a different format and the finals are going to have a different format. So I'm just getting that prepared for you guys here.
Ketchup app, the answer to your question is because the way that the wins losses then wins minus losses plus the bonuses from winning or losing equals total score. Because Ketchupap's asking how is it possible that Baron's gone down to a 1 because of how leveling the playing field in this format is. This is the devastatingly leveling playing field.
Exactly. So yeah, we see actually, despite Baron winning less games than Birdo Burrito overall, he won the games where it counted, winning 2 of his 3 series and getting most of his losses right there in that last one where he was only able to pick up 1 win against Innocent Bubbles. But because he won that head-to-head versus Birdo, he won where it mattered. He won in the matchups where it mattered. That is why he has the tiebreaker over Birdo Burrito. And yeah, I mean, if we did this in just the normal way, their tournaments typically score things with just simply who wins the most matches, we would still see these 2 players going to the finals, with both of them winning 2 matches, with Birdo and Killswitch only winning 1 apiece. So it doesn't necessarily change the final outcome, but it definitely changes the story of how you get there, and it changed a lot on how much was on the line headed into that final match.
Absolutely, it alters the value of every game that you're playing, and that's Sorry, I had a moment, chat, where I thought I was vamping because J King appeared to freeze on my screen, which is always terrifying. But yeah, I mean, the format did make you have to really think about the value of every match in a way that you don't normally have to in clean tournaments. And single elimination or even double elimination brackets don't produce the same level of pressure that this environment can.
Yeah. And the reason I might look distracted at the moment is I am setting up the screen, and here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, I'm blocking this slightly. So here is the overview of the finals. It's a very simple format. We still have the no cards and multiple decks restriction. So this is going to be the same restriction that has been out throughout this entire tournament. You are required to bring unique cards in all 5 decks. This time, still 5 decks, but no ban in the finals. It is going to be a best of 9. You have to bring 5 good decks that you are feeling comfortable with. And we've been playing with reserve cards throughout this entire format. The finals is going to be standard. So no reserved cards allowed. Only the cards that you're allowed to play on ladder or in OCC are going to be allowed. But again, the deck building restriction with 5 decks that all have to be all 5 you have to feel confident on because you're going to need to win with all 5 to take home this final event. This is this is sort of the final test, and it's actually going to be very interesting because arguably you could say Baron is somebody who performs better in these alt formats than maybe just standard meta. At least that's what the tournament stats have suggested, where the OCCs, which are always just standard meta,
Mm.
is where Baron has performed the worst compared to the other players in the field, but here he has performed quite well in these various different formats. So the question is, with the final being standard-esque, obviously there's still the restriction on which decks you can bring, but the
Yeah.
card pool is just going to be the normal standard pool. Is this going to favor Bubbles, who maybe has a bit more conventional tournament experience, or is that's no duplicate cards across decks restriction still enough of a restriction to allow for or sort of force players into out of their comfort zone and into these sort of different lineups? Because if this was a best of 5, it's very easy to think of 3 decks in a standard format that don't interact with this. But once you get to 5, you're definitely reaching there a little bit and are going to be forced out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to a certain extent, I'm picking secret app option number 3 here, which is I actually think it pretty much balances itself out here. Because on the one hand, yeah, the previous tournament experience and meta analysis is a thing, although I also know Bubbles hasn't been hyperactive and aware of the meta recently. But I've seen in chat people commenting about they're going to have to play meta. The thing is, chat, you're gonna be surprised how difficult it is to bring 5 tier 1 meta decks when you can have no crossover cards at all.
Exactly. You have Shibata in one deck, War Machine
Yeah,
one deck.
one deck.
Those are like the 2 cards in like every single meta deck right now. So
Yeah. And that's going to be huge and going to make you think very carefully about where you want to place. Also, just some of the most generically good cards. No, like Brit Ally letting me get really good draw in multiple decks because I can only run Convoy in one deck. The trying to, like, if you want to do it, chat, by the way, absolutely, and if you do come up with lineups, send them to me on my Discord and stuff. Try and build in this restriction, and you'll start to see why part of this does favor the more creative deck building, because there are just moments where you can't get the card you want. So it's going to be really interesting, and the lack of reserved cards makes that pool stretch even thinner. And then, of course, you also can't rely on your ban being able to get you any edge in this because you don't get one. You are going to have to face everything your opponent brings.
yeah, I'm incredibly excited for the finals. This is actually the format of the original King's Cup tournament was a 4-person single elimination or well double elimination bracket. No, I had a single elimination bracket with a 3rd place match. Best of 9s standard format and no bans and rather than no cards across nations, it was you can only bring an ally nation once. So you can't just bring like German ally for everything. So slightly less harsh restrictions, but best of 9 slugfests. We saw several games go to game 9 in the first stage. That was all cast in one day. That was a mistake. That's one of the benefits of this mode is you can get to spread the casts out over several days. The exact date of the finals will be announced shortly, so I will definitely mention it on my YouTube channel if you're just subscribed to me there. But I will also announce it on my Discord channel. Most likely you'll see it there first, so join my Discord channel if you haven't already to stay up to date. I'll also be spreading that around the other channels, so you can see it in the community content sections of Bear's Discord, Red Sun's Discord, in the official cards Discord as well. You'll be able to see it there. It most likely will be 2 weekends from now. I will say that now because next weekend is Thanksgiving here in Canada, so I will be out of town. And just to allow the most people the potential of watching the finals live, I would like to hold it on a weekend.
On behalf of Bubbles, who is giving me the heads up, you need to check your DMs. Apparently.
Alrighty.
I got you, Bubbles. It's fine. It is hard to keep an eye on chat. I did just catch it.
Well, yeah, we'll sort that out later. But yeah, most likely it's it's certainly not going to be on this upcoming weekend. But yeah, if you guys prefer the weekend, if you prefer Fridays or at some point during the week, definitely you can DM me, let me know what time, or just say now in Twitch chat what type of days you guys as the audience will best be able to sort of take in this tournament live, because obviously it's not just about the players, it's not just about us here in the casting booth, it's also about the sort of the show that we're putting on for the audience, and we want everybody to be, or as many people as possible to be able to be there to watch the finals for this event take place. So it will most likely be 2 weekends from now. 2 weekends from now is the OCC, so it might be the Sunday. But enough technical details. Let's get into.
It'll figure itself out.
Yes.
It will be epic. It will have casters. It will have drama. It will have 2 of the very best players in the game. It will have a best of 9 set like you have never seen before. Just get hyped and keep on that train.
Yes. And before we close out the stream, we will be doing an additional. Let's say 6 giveaways here. 2 300 gold giveaways, 4 150 gold giveaways. Obviously this set ended much faster than a lot of us expected going into it, especially the first 2 weeks, just game 7 after game 7. Week 3, odds and evens, much shorter sets, much faster sets, and even just faster games in general. So let's get into the giveaway, so join it if you haven't already. And let's start pulling some entrants. So we'll start and end on the 300 gold. So the first 300 gold one will be going to Mynheer Dank. So congratulations, you have earned yourself 300 gold, Mynheer Dank. Now let's do the 150 gold giveaways. So Ocaranza Juan Bautista. Congratulations again. I know you've been watching several of these tournaments. We have ZN Sh. So congratulations, Zunch. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but great name. We have Laser Wars returning again. It was here yesterday. Congratulations on another giveaway win. The last 150 gold giveaway here is going to be going out to Cursed, of course. My longtime viewer, Cursed. Congratulations on another giveaway victory. And to close it out with a 300 gold giveaway, will be going to none other than our very own Red Sun.
Sunny!
Yes, shout out to Red Sun in the chat. Congratulations to all of the giveaway winners. I will be getting those your way soon. And whenever the finals is, TBD, there will be no shortage of giveaways to give out then. I believe I'm still sitting on 5 300 gold giveaways for the finals, so be sure to join in then and get your hands on some of these giveaway codes. So thank you very much, Bear. Thank you very much to all of our players who played today and have played throughout all the weeks. And thank you very much, everybody, for watching. This will be up on YouTube shortly. Codes will be going out shortly, and the announcement for the finals will be going out shortly as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one.